Fearless Love, Book 3 in the Shelter Sisters series, a sweet small-town romantic suspense by Heather Tullis. 1 Chapter 1. Sometimes timing was everything, and Bennett's was on the fritz. Bennett pulled into the enormous garage right behind Nash's car and parked her silver Camry in her space. She clicked the remote to close the door behind her and began gathering the bags of freshly cut wool she had just picked up from a farm outside of Crystal Creek. Though she could have gotten out of the car immediately, she dawdled, hoping he would go inside without her, but when she looked up, he stood on the other side of her door. Sexy, delicious Nash, with his multitude of muscles and dark hair that had started to grow out since he finished his time in the army a couple of weeks ago. He wore a few days' worth of dark stubble that only increased how utterly kissable he was. He had the whole package, which was why she had been doing her best to keep him at arm's length. Reining in her attraction, Bennett forced an impassive expression as he opened the car door. "Hey, do you need a hand with anything?" She wanted to say no, thanks, but all he would have to do was take one glance into her back seat to know she was lying. Even with his help, she would need to make 2 trips. "Sure, thanks." She slid through the open door and turned back to grab several bags from the front passenger seat. When she turned, she caught him eyeing her all-too-substantial rear end as he removed bags from the back. Instead of looking embarrassed at being caught, though, he simply shot her a smile of appreciation before turning all of his attention to the items he was retrieving for her. Automatically, she headed for the inner door that led through the indoor pool area to the private elevator and secret entrance to the 2nd and 3rd floors where they both lived. "It's not 5 yet," Nash reminded her. The secret entrance went straight through Vanna's office, so they didn't use it during business hours. 4 more months. Construction sucks, she said, as she pivoted toward the door on the right that went outside. The private elevator by the pool only stopped on the 4th, 5th, and 6th floors. She and the other 5 women she considered sisters were renovating and creating large condo spaces for themselves on those floors in what used to be a run-down apartment building. In the meantime, they were all living on the 2nd floor, and the guys, Nash and 2 of his army buddies, Caleb and Ethan, were living on the 3rd floor. They walked along the brick building to the new side entrance that led to the 2nd and 3rd floors and the matchmaking business Vanna ran. Safety had been their main concern when they had created the secret passage through Vanna's office, with convenience a close second. Bennett dropped a heavy bag to use her key card and a 4-digit PIN to open the side door, and held the door long enough for Nash to catch it before stepping inside. She turned toward the stairwell, her usual method of going upstairs, but then veered toward the elevator, which only reached the 2nd and 3rd floors. She keyed them in, and Nash joined her for the short journey. Nash wrinkled his nose when they were shut into the confines of the elevator. "Wow, this stinks. What's in the bags?" "Wool. It still has to be cleaned, so yeah, it's pretty stinky." Of course, she could still smell the soft, earthy, musky cologne he always wore. The elevator doors opened and Nash grinned. Hey, how are you doing?" he greeted Bobby, Andrea's toddler, who was all smiles and tight black curls as he greeted them. "Hi." Bobby smiled and opened and closed his fingers toward them in a wave. "Bobby, where did you go?" Andrea stuck her head out of the central apartment the women all used as a common space for group gatherings, childcare, and after-school homework. Since it was only the 6 of them and their various children on the floor, the kids were secure, even if they did sneak into the hall while the moms' backs were turned. This was one of the great perks to winning the lotto the previous summer: private space and security for the women and their children. They had shared the winning ticket and pooled the money to purchase the building and renovate it. At the end of the summer, the upper 3 floors would be ready for the women to move into, and then the 2nd and 3rd floors would get their turn at renewal. The 1st floor was nearly done, and Bennett was excited to get all of the items priced and arranged in the retail space. "Oh, great, you're back. That looks like quite a haul," Andrea said to Bennett. "Did you get it all?" "Nope. Still another 3 bags in the car. Comfrey's planning to shear next week, so there's plenty more to come." Bennett couldn't be happier about that. After Comfrey had introduced her to the joys of felting wool and eventually processing it from freshly cut, Bennett had searched far and wide for enough wool to work with. Her efforts over the past 2 years had paid off, though, and people were now contacting her to sell their wool. "I'll go back for the rest," Nash offered as they stepped into Bennett's fiber studio a moment later. They carried the bags of wool into the single bedroom in the apartment across from her own to stack with the other bags she had been bringing home from various farms over the past 2 weeks. "Whoa, this is going to take a while to get through," he said, looking around at the bags of wool stored on shelving around the room. "Not that long. It has to last all year." She couldn't wait to get into her place upstairs with the spacious studio she had designed and tons of storage for dirty wool, cleaned wool, carded wool, dyed wool, and then wool that had been spun into yarn. The new yarn was starting to gain a lot of attention for its quality and usually sold off of Etsy almost as quickly as she could post it. Now that she had the new equipment to help her get it ready to sell more quickly and a fresh batch of fleece to work with, she'd be able to work faster than in the past. "Keys," he said, holding out a hard palm. She looked at his palm and then back at him before lifting her brows. "I have some, yes." "I can get the rest of the wool from your car," he said when she just looked at him. "You don't have to do that." "I know, keys." Bennett set her fists on her hips. "Why are you so bossy? Why are you so stubborn and independent that you can't let me help you out?" She held in a huff of air. "I did let you help me out. Or do you not remember lugging those bags up here?" He wiggled his fingers and she decided to give it up. She was exhausted from running errands all afternoon and she needed to check on her daughter, Grace. Bennett set the car key into his hand. "Thank you." "Wow, you almost managed to sound like you appreciated the help that time instead of wanting to strangle me for doing something nice. Progress." He turned and headed out the door. She let out a slow breath as she watched his entirely too sexy form disappear into the hallway. When Caleb and Mina had started dating only a few days after the women had moved into the building in January, they hadn't realized he would bring his 2 buddies into their lives as well. Now Mina and Caleb were getting married in September, with Sheila and Ethan hard on their heels. Somehow Nash had secured a place on the 3rd floor with the rest of the men. Maybe because they were all the family he had now. Maybe because he was partners with Ethan in their new security firm, which had its office on the 3rd floor as well. In any case, he was always underfoot these days, which made keeping her distance that much harder. Bennett left her studio door ajar and headed to the common space where Grace and Chelsea, in the same 3rd grade class at school, were working on math homework. Sheila sat with them, leaning over Chelsea's shoulder to check her work and holding an open package of fruit snacks for her toddler son, Parker, who was one of Bobby's partners in crime. "How's it going?" Bennett asked as she ran a hand down her daughter's soft blonde hair, a match to her own in color and curls. "I hate math. School is over in 3.5 days. Why do we still have to do homework?" Grace asked. "To keep stretching your mind so hopefully you'll remember this stuff at the end of the summer," Bennett reminded her, yet again. "I hate stretching my mind." Grace let out a deep sigh and answered another question. She was far too advanced for the simple sheets they had given her, and Bennett guessed Grace was mostly annoyed that it was no more than busy work for her. "I know. Life stinks, and then you become a mom and are responsible for everyone else. Good thing I get to have you as compensation for the drudgery of being an adult." She pressed a kiss to her daughter's head. There was nothing she wouldn't do, and little she hadn't done, for this little girl. "Have you been down to see the work today?" Bennett asked Sheila regarding the construction on the main floor for Andrea's photography studio and the retail space for the crafts the other 4 of them made. "Not since this morning. I've been here since I pulled myself away from my shop." Sheila did amazing metal projects, welding almost anything anyone could think of, including all of the metal railing in the building stairwells and around the roof. The woman was an artist. The windows were all covered so they could paint when I left, but I came in the side entrance just now. I can't wait to see the final results. "It's amazing." Deirdre had entered the room in time to hear what they were talking about. They're cleaning up now. We'll go down after dinner. By then it'll be dry enough that the little ones won't leave handprints in it." "Awesome." Nash passed back through the hall with the last 3 bags of wool. "I see you found a pack animal," Sheila said, looking into the hall. He refused to take no for an answer. "Seems to me that you should stop saying no so often. Seriously, not every guy is like James," Sheila said. Bennett would really like to stop saying no, but that always seemed to lead to heartache and badness. It had taken her over 2 years to fully trust the other women, her sisters. That had only happened because of dire necessity. There was no way she would let anyone else become important enough to her to fully trust them. Nash strolled into the common room, hands in his pockets. All set. He fished out her car keys and set them in her waiting hand. "Thanks, really. I appreciate it." Bennett did her best to infuse more sincerity into her words than she had earlier. "Anytime." He held her gaze for a moment longer than anyone else would have, making her pulse speed, and he then turned, brushing a hand over Parker's head and greeting him as he walked back out. A moment later, the door to the stairwell shut loudly as he headed up to the 3rd floor where he lived and worked. "Breathe," Deirdre whispered in Bennett's ear. She did, and realized she had stopped when he had held her gaze. "He'd be all yours if you just gave him a chance," Sheila said in a low tone. Bennett shook her head. That was not going to happen, no matter how much she sometimes wanted it to.
Nash shut the door to the stairwell behind him when he reached the 3rd floor and leaned against it, tipping his head back. Maybe he shouldn't have taken the job or apartment here. Being around Bennett every day when she fought her instincts against even being civil to him was utterly painful. The first time he'd seen her, he'd been dazed. It wasn't that she was beautiful, though she was. It wasn't that she was spunky, though she was that as well. Something about her just called to him, and as much as he tried to ignore it, the attraction just got stronger the longer he knew her. He let out a long breath and then headed to the office where Ethan was working at a computer. "Oh good, you're back. I thought I saw your car come in the garage a while ago." He gestured to the monitor that was split screen to the building's outside cameras. "Carried some things up for Bennett." And that was enough of thinking about her. "I took about 1,000 pictures around Stone Enterprises. I agree, their security system is totally inadequate. I can start mapping out the areas now." "Sounds good. Start with the front." Nash slid into the chair at the desk next to Ethan's and pulled up the CAD program they used to design systems. He opened Google Earth on a second screen to get approximate measurements of the building and set to work. After an hour, Ethan called it a night and headed downstairs to eat dinner with Sheila. Nash kept working and heard Caleb go down for dinner with Mina. Both kept an open invitation for him to join them, but sometimes it was easier to stay upstairs where he wouldn't have to have his heart ripped out by the sight of Bennett. Being the third wheel at their family dinners every single night made it feel even worse. And how stupid and sappy was that? She was just a woman. He dated lots of women. Before meeting Bennett, since then, only 2, and both were dismal failures since he had been comparing them the whole time to the seriously prickly goddess downstairs. Time passed as he finished drawing up the building and started adding the cameras that were already there. The door at the top of the stairs opened, and Ethan came to the office door. "You're still working? Please tell me you ate something, at least." Nash looked at the clock and realized his stomach had been complaining for a while. It was already after 8. "Nope, just working. I should eat something. I think I have a frozen pizza." "Seriously, dude, you know you're welcome to eat with us." "Yep, I was busy." Nash saved the diagram and walked past Ethan toward his own apartment. "You want to go work out? I'll just grab a protein bar first." They had a set of weights in one of the empty apartments, but he needed something more. A few seconds passed before Ethan answered with a resigned sigh. "Sure, I could use a run, meet you in a few." And if that didn't put this itchy feeling to rest, Nash could always go to work on their speed bag or head to the 24-hour gym. He grabbed the protein bar and downed it while he changed into clothes for the run. When he returned to the hall, Ethan was just coming out and Caleb's door was cracked open. "He's coming too." "Way too many hours sitting behind a desk lately," Ethan said as he began stretching in the hall. Yeah. Caleb joined them, and after a few minutes of stretching to loosen muscles, they all headed out. If he glanced up to see if Bennett's light was on in her apartment, it didn't mean anything, did it?
2 Grace finished her homework early and began begging Bennett for pool time, as she did every day. The girl was a fish and would no doubt request pool time every day during the upcoming summer holidays. "Come on, Mom, please." The pool on the first floor had only been functional for 6 weeks, and Grace couldn't get enough of it. Bennett checked the time. "Okay, but that means an early dinner. We're going down to check out the store after the crew clears out for the night, and then we'll swim after." "Yay!" "But," Bennett cut her off, "that means you need to get all of your school stuff for tomorrow together before we go downstairs, and we need to eat dinner first. You go get your things ready for tomorrow and change into your suit, and I'll take care of dinner." Grace rushed to their apartment. "You're such a pushover," Mina said. "Tell me about it." But she asked the past 2 days, and I'm not in the middle of anything now, so we might as well. I picked up goggles and a swim cap for her the other day. Like I said, pushover. Every day of the week for her. Her biggest fear had always been of losing Grace. "What are you doing for dinner?" Mina asked. "I don't know, frozen pizza? Order in pizza?" Mina shook her head. "You need more cooking lessons. Come over any time and we'll cover some new recipes." "It doesn't matter how hard you try, you're never going to turn me into a chef," Bennett said. "A chef, no, but you can still make more than frozen pizza. Hey, I'm the queen of mac and cheese. As long as it came out of a box." When they had lived together, Mina had tried to teach Bennett how to cook, but somehow things never went right. Either it was burned or undercooked, she used the wrong ingredients, or the stove caught on fire. Even with baking a frozen pizza, it turned out under or overdone more often than not. That meant that her daughter ate way more easy food from the freezer aisle or a box than either of them thought was healthy. But it was the best Bennett could manage most days. "You just need to keep trying." Mina would never give up on her. "How are the wedding plans coming?" Bennett didn't see any reason to continue a conversation that was going nowhere. "Good. Caleb's mom is coming up so we can look for reception decorations. She's totally excited about adding an Indian flair to our wedding and reception." "What did you decide about the ceremony?" Mina had wanted to honor both her Hindu heritage and her husband's Christian beliefs, which had taken a little flexibility on both sides. "A Catholic ceremony, but I'll be in Hindu dress. I think it'll be beautiful." Mina was very Americanized in many ways, having grown up here, but she never forgot her roots. "Of course it will. You're beautiful, so it could hardly be anything else." "Mom," Grace called from their apartment door, "I guess I better go do something about dinner." Bennett excused herself and headed for the freezer. What did she have that she could heat up quickly? 2 frozen pot pies stared back at her. Well, that wasn't going to work. They needed to eat sooner than that. She dug through the fridge and cupboards and found a can of refried beans, some shredded cheese, and tortillas. She heated the refried beans in a bowl in the microwave and set it all out on the table with a little salsa. Dinner is served. Bennett set out plates as Grace came back into the dining room in her swimming suit. "Is everything ready for tomorrow morning?" "Yes." "Hey, use that annoyed tone with me and maybe you won't get to go swimming." Bennett sent her a narrow-eyed look. "Sorry." Grace plopped on the chair. "I put my stuff in my backpack for school, put the dirty clothes in the hamper, and set out clothes for tomorrow. Done." "Good." Bennett sat beside her daughter and asked her more about what she did at school that day and upcoming plans for the week as they ate their burritos. Dinner was her favorite time of day, especially when they got to eat alone without any distractions. Grace was often hurried and grouchy at breakfast and in a rush to get back to Chelsea to continue their activities when she was home for lunch. It had been just the 2 of them since Grace was only a few months old, and even though she adored Mina and was close to the other women, Bennett had missed the quiet time with Grace that had been lost when they moved into the women's shelter. Then on to sharing an apartment with Mina and her son, Devon. And finally to this building. She needed her shelter sisters and depended on them a lot, but she never let herself forget that if things went south, she may need to get away and start over again. They had already done so a half-dozen times, and she would do it again if needed, though she really hoped this could be her forever home. They finished dinner quickly, and Bennett convinced Grace to clean up while Bennett put on her own suit and her clothes on top again. Next, they headed down to meet with the others at the front of the building to walk to the retail area on the first floor. This project had been in the works for nearly a year, and they were all excited that the workmen were done with the space, and in plenty of time for the grand opening. They walked down to the main floor, and Deirdre held the door for everyone to pour out into the store. It was great, even if it was still empty. The walls were a soft pink with lavender trim. The cement floors had been stained and sealed, and the windows gleamed. "Mom, it's so pretty," Grace said. "Yes, it is. Just wait until we fill it with shelves filled with pretty things." Bennett brushed her fingers over one of the walls, hardly believing it was true. "I figured we could take some time to block off where everything goes." Sheila lifted her clipboard, which had 3 measuring tapes and 3 rolls of painter's tape on it. "Let's get to work," Andrea said. They spread out, breaking into 3 teams, measuring the locations of every display, which Sheila had planned to the square foot. They marked off areas for each of them to display their wares, and added the numbers from the display cases and shelves that were sitting unassembled in the storeroom, so they would easily be able to place every piece. It would take more than a week to get the shelving all put together, signage up, and the inventory loaded in while they managed their other commitments. But even if it meant long, sweaty days, Bennett was looking forward to the process. When blue tape marked the corners of every large display, Bennett took a look around at what they'd accomplished and the 2 groups of kids playing in the corners out of the way for the moment. It felt good, right, and very special. "This is going to be fun. I'll take first shift tomorrow." "I'll watch the boys," Sheila said. They set their plans, and everyone else returned upstairs for dinner, while Bennett and Grace headed to the pool. They could swim for an uninterrupted hour if they started now. Bennett went through the doors, stripped down to her swimming suit, and did a cannonball jump into the deep end. As the warm water enveloped her, she thought maybe they both needed the swim time.
Nash, glutton for punishment that he was, headed down to the main floor to help the ladies after finishing the site drawing for Stone Enterprises. Once the painting was done on the main floor, the women had gotten right to work to finish the retail space and Andrea's photography studio. The space felt warm and inviting, even before they had the merchandise out. He found Andrea and Bennett already working in their areas and started hauling boxes of unassembled displays to the areas where the women needed them. He also helped Bennett unbox the first set of shelves for the main store area when Andrea headed to a room on one side that housed her photography studio. "You don't have to do this, you know," Bennett said when they were halfway through putting together the first set of shelves. "I know. Helping me isn't going to get you brownie points." He was so tired of having her fight him every time he wanted to be a nice guy, and it didn't seem to matter which of the women he was assisting at the time. Bennett was always so prickly. "You think I'm only helping to get on your good side?" Maybe the t-shirt she was wearing today was right. "I'm not always rude and sarcastic. Sometimes I'm making yarn." Bennett closed her eyes. "No, I know better than that. You're a genuinely helpful person who pitches in whenever anyone needs something. I'm sorry." She brushed away the blonde curls clinging to her sweaty cheek with the back of her hand. "Is there a reason you're always so prickly with me? You're perfectly nice to every single person I've seen you with, except for me. I know grabbing you on the steps that first time wasn't exactly the ideal way to meet, but did it really make you think I'm a total jerk?" "No, okay. You were doing your job. We asked you to try to get into the place to find weaknesses. That has nothing to do with it." She lifted the next metal slat shelf into place, and he took the other side. "Then what's the freaking deal? Why are you determined to hate me?" "I don't hate you," she said. "I just don't want to get involved with you. And the only way to do that is if you verbally beat on me every time I get in range?" Apparently. Surprised, he tipped his head to look at her more closely, noticed the slight flush on her cheeks, the way she avoided looking at him. Why would she have to be mean in order to keep him away from her? Unless, wait, you're as attracted to me as I am to you. Her pale cheeks flushed even more. Attraction is nothing without trust. Seriously? Now you can't trust me? What have I ever done to show you I can't be trusted? You trust everyone else who lives here, to some degree or another. So, in other words, you don't completely trust anyone, not even the women you claim as your sisters. What's happened to you that you don't dare trust anyone completely? Bennett set the shelf into place and stepped back. I'm going to go card some wool or something. I'll be back down later. She turned toward the stairwell at the front of the building. Nash watched her run away from his questions, perplexed, frustrated, and sorry for her. He didn't think he could function the way she did day in and day out. Though part of him wanted to dance a jig at the thought that she was attracted to him too, the other part said to forget it. There was no way to force someone to trust you or give you a chance, especially when they were determined not to.
3. Nearly shaking with emotions she couldn't define, Bennett hurried into her apartment. She could not do this. She slumped onto her sofa and tipped back her head, her gaze directed to the framed painting Comfrey had done for her, as she had for each of the other women in the shelter's programs. It looked like stained glass with the word fearless emblazoned in the middle, the word that Bennett had picked for herself. It was the attribute she most wanted to embody after a lifetime of fear. Since getting the picture, she had been doing so well in her life in living fearlessly, until Nash had come along. Well, it wasn't all him, but he had tied her up in knots from the beginning. Her attraction to him was disturbing, terrifying, and she didn't trust it. Sheila and Mina had settled down with his friends, but that didn't mean she was going to fall into the same trap. She might have trusted the others to claim the lotto ticket without her, to create the legal trust that all 6 of them held equal shares in, so her name wouldn't have to be splashed on all of the television stations and posters around town. Still, there were plenty of things that she held back, not trusting anyone with her whole truth, even when she trusted them to protect Grace. She hardly trusted anyone with Grace. Just sending her across the street to school was seriously difficult, especially after what had happened with Chelsea's kidnapping in March. But in general, she felt like she was reaching her potential of fearlessness pretty well. And then she looked into Nash's face and he rightly accused her of being attracted to him. There it was, right out in the open. He liked her. Not that he'd left that as a secret for long, and now he knew how much she liked him. How screwed up was it that she treated him with disdain? No one but him. He didn't deserve it. She knew he didn't. She didn't want to teach Grace that it was okay to be mean to anyone else, ever. You could protect yourself from danger and still be respectful, even kind most of the time. She pushed herself to her feet and wandered into the kitchen area, opening the fridge even though she wasn't hungry, then diverted to the Snickers bar she hid in the back of the freezer under the bag of peas. It was her emergency stash, and this was an emergency. She bit into the frozen candy bar and closed her eyes as she focused on the flavors in her mouth, the crunch of the nuts, the way the frozen nougat melted, the sweet and salty combination. A few more deep breaths and the rest of this chocolate and she'd be ready to shift to working in her studio.
Whoa!
Mina's voice came from the open doorway. You brought out the big guns. What's wrong? Bennett opened her eyes and wished she had bothered to close the apartment door. Most of the time, they left their doors open when they were around, which meant, come on in. A closed door, on the other hand, meant that someone wanted privacy, alone time, or just quiet with their kid. Why hadn't it even crossed her mind to close the door? Mina had lived with her in the last set of dumpy apartments, roommates for nearly 2 years, and she knew all of Bennett's tells. Bennett took another bite of the candy bar instead of answering, and Mina closed the door behind her as she stepped fully into the apartment. Seriously, what's wrong? I'm a jerk to Nash, Bennett sighed. That's hardly big news. You've been a jerk to him all year. Yep, Bennett bit off another, smaller bite. So, what's changed? You don't usually need your candy stash after seeing him. Annoyed that the candy wasn't doing the trick, Bennett pulled the wrapper back up on the half that was left and returned it to its hiding place. He asked me why I was being a jerk. Somehow, He came to the conclusion that I like him, so now I'm a prickly jerk who uses meanness as a self-defense mechanism. Mina stood without saying anything. You could at least pretend that I was wrong about that. Bennett leaned on the half wall that blocked off the kitchen. That would be lying, and we have a policy against that. Bennett stared at the closed door for several long seconds before admitting. I told him I don't trust him, but the truth is, I don't trust me either, especially when I'm around him. I keep trying to push him away so I don't have to worry about giving in, and that's mean and jerky and wrong. More silence. Sometimes I hate this no-lying policy. Now Mina moved closer, setting a hand on Bennett's arm. Do you really intend to be alone for the rest of your life? I'm not alone. I have Grace. And you guys. Mina's dark eyebrow rose in a graceful arch. It seemed everything the woman did was graceful, from her soft Indian voice to the way she managed to twist herself in knots when she was doing yoga, to the way her hands moved as she set up her corner where she did her Hindu meditation. Bennett folded her arms over her stomach. Not everyone gets a happily ever after with the person of their choice. No, but not only are you not trying to find someone who can be there for you in every way, but you're actively rejecting a very good guy you're attracted to who cares about you already, and that makes you a chicken. If you want a happily ever after, you have to do half of the work. You're not going to dare me into going out with him or something. Though Mina knew how to push her buttons, because you're too scared to enjoy a simple meal with a nice man who is friends with your friends. Totally chicken. I'm not going to fall for it. But she already felt her back going up. She hated to turn down a dare. Ever since she was 5 and a kid at school, dared her to see if she could walk across the monkey bars, and she kicked his trash. She hadn't been able to back down. Maybe it was a way to take her own power and control when she lived in a home where she was surrounded by abuse and neglect and felt completely out of control. Bok, bok, bok. Mina did a great impression. I'm going to the studio to do some work. You go downstairs and deal with Nash if you think he's so great. All right, chicken. Mina turned back to the door, casually opening it and heading down the hall. A moment later, she let out another couple of boks, and Bennett stopped short as Nash came to stand just outside her now open door. What's her deal? Nash asked. Nothing, but her cheeks heated again. She wasn't normally given to blushing. He waited a few more seconds, as though he didn't believe it and thought she might explain, then shook his head when she didn't. Fine. Look, I'm sorry if I've been putting pressure on you. I hate that you refuse to give us a chance, but maybe I should find somewhere else to live. If I'm only here to work during the day, that should help make us both more comfortable. Bennett crossed her arms over her chest, wondering if he was trying to manipulate her, but his expression was open and honest. He would move out, despite everything. She tried to figure out if he did have an angle. Apparently, she waited too long because he nodded. Fine, I'll start looking tonight. He turned to go. Feeling like a jerk, Bennett looked at the ceiling and took a deep breath. Don't. Nash stopped and pivoted back, but she didn't look at him, focusing on a watermark that had shown up through the paint on her ceiling. Look, I'm sorry I've been a jerk to you. You don't deserve it, and I'll try not to be so mean. I won't promise I'll always succeed. He let the silence stretch for several seconds. I can accept your baby steps. You're sure about me staying here? What else could she tell him but the truth? She looked him in the eye this time. No, but let's give this new truce a try and see how it goes. I can live with that. He extended a hand to her to shake, and after an instant of hesitation, she slid her small, strong hand into his big, hard one. He was only 5'10". Not all that much taller than her 5'5", but he was just tall enough and broad enough through the shoulders, with all those muscles, to make her feel like her small frame was the perfect size. There was no static electricity when their hands met, but something else flowed between them, and she flicked her gaze back to his. She was suddenly very aware of the air rushing into her lungs as she breathed, and the way his dark eyes zeroed in on her. The warmth of him, and the way she wanted to sway toward him. Instead, she took a full step back and released his hand. Whoa. I really do need to get some work done in my studio, she said as her heart danced a Macarena. I'll let you go then. He withdrew and headed down the hall. As he passed Mina's door just before the stairwell, the chicken sounds floated out of her apartment. Bennett shook her head and stepped into her studio, thinking about her reaction to Nash. She couldn't let that happen again, no matter how much she wanted to.
Nash was still helping to set up displays in the retail store when Bennett rejoined them more than an hour later. She met his gaze and nodded, her expression much calmer and easier than before. Obviously, whatever she was doing in her wool studio helped soothe her. It was the same results he usually got from a solid workout. Too bad putting together shelving hadn't had the same effect on him. He decided to go for a run after things settled down. He paused working to refill his water bottle from the large cooler of lemon water Andrea had brought down earlier and grabbed one of the cookies that someone, probably also Andrea, had set out a while after that. As he ate, he studied the space. Each floor of the building was 15,000 square feet. Once they deleted the space taken up by the indoor parking space and pool, a third was gone. Sheila's welding shop and the offices for Vanna's matchmaker business took another 2,000, leaving 8,000 square foot for storage and office space, Andrea's photography studio, and the retail space. The retail area was large for the modest amount of merchandise he imagined the 5 creatives would produce, but he knew they were hoping to carry handcrafted products made by other women who had been through the shelter and possibly other local artists. The place was very feminine and inviting, and yet somehow not off-putting for a man, or at least not for him. The tables and shelves were all the same off-white, though he had heard Mina and Andrea discussing sticky-back papers with designs to brighten some of the areas. The wind blew outside, and the huge vinyl sign they had put up announcing their opening the following week flapped in the breeze, catching his eye. Several of the ladies' phones beeped at exactly the same time, signaling that school would be getting out in 5 minutes. "I'll be happy to help with pickup duty," Nash said. Even though things had calmed down a lot since the mess with Sheila's ex, they still didn't allow the 4 girls to walk alone to and from school across the street each day. He thought it was a little overboard, but knew that security and safety had been at a premium for these ladies for far too long. And they needed the peace of mind. "I'll go with you." Mina used a drill to insert a screw in the table she'd been working on and set it aside. Nash didn't miss the sideways glare Bennett gave Mina. He wondered if that had anything to do with what had happened between Bennett and himself earlier. He waited until the crossing guard had motioned them over to the school grounds before asking, "That was some glare Bennett shot you." "She's worried I'm going to talk to you about the 2 of you. I wouldn't blame you if you gave up on a relationship with her, but I also hope you don't. I think that if she lets you, you could be good together." Preaching to the choir here. I know. She's told me a lot about her past, but I get the feeling that there's a whole lot more she's keeping private. Trust is hard for her. How did you ever get her to agree to live with you? Mina smiled. It wasn't easy, but eventually she realized neither of us was going to get out of the shelter anytime soon, without following Andrea and Sheila's example. Even then, she was a seriously nervous mother every time she had to leave me with Grace so she could go to work. I think she was more nervous than I was, and Grace was already 6. I was leaving her with a newborn. I can't even comprehend how hard it must have been for you. I think of my own mom, raising me alone, and shudder at the thought of being a single dad. The bell rang, and they automatically turned toward the school. You're great with the kids. I think you'd handle it just fine. I mean, it's hard, so hard. But it's so worth it. The kids make up for every bit of heartache and stress. 2 rows of students flung the front doors open to load into cars, buses, and fill the crosswalks. First graders Celine and Corinda came out after a moment, heading right over to where the adults always stood to pick them up. They giggled about something, Keelan's bright red hair blazing against Corinda's, which was so pale it was nearly white. "Hey there, did you have a good day?" Nash asked. "I aced the class spelling bee today," Corinda said. "Awesome!" Nash held out his fist for a bump, and she complied. "What about you?" Mina asked Keelan. "I got out on the 2nd round, but Mrs. Stockton said that she loved the dragon I drew." She pulled a pencil sketch of a dragon from the folder she carried. It was pretty impressive for a kid her age. Whoa, I couldn't draw that good now. Never mind when I was your age. Way to go. He offered her a fist to bump as well, and she did so with gusto, just as Chelsea and Grace arrived. Somehow the women had convinced the school to place the two first graders together in Mrs. Stockton's class, and the two third graders together in Mrs. Belliston's class, so they always emerged in pairs. "Only 2.5 more days of school," Grace said as she joined them. "But who's counting?" Nash ushered the girls toward the crosswalk. "How was school today?" "I hate math, but English was fun. We're reading the best story." Grace went off talking about it, finishing with, "No homework today, though. Bonus." "Are we working in the store tonight?" she asked. "Yep, and we're ordering pizza." "Yes," Chelsea practically danced as they crossed the road. "I love pizza." "I know, it's the best. Too bad we can't figure out how to eat all of our favorite meals as a pizza," he said. "Exactly." A moment later, they pulled open the doors to the store and walked in. Mina relocked it behind them. "I'm hungry, Mom," Grace said as she gave Bennett a quick hug. "You're always hungry. You can have one cookie. One. If you're still hungry after that, you can have an apple." "Cookies," Chelsea called out. "Same rule applies for you, Bug. Set your school stuff over there in the blue bin." Sheila gestured to a plastic tub in one corner. "Maybe we'll be able to keep it all in one place until we go upstairs." "We can dream," Deirdre said. Having the little girls there was both more chaotic and helpful than working with just the adults. They fetched tools and held on to things the adults needed for at least 15 minutes before the sugar high wore off and they started peeling off to play on the other side of the room. Thankfully, Andrea had the boys gated off in a corner of her photo studio while she put together new lighting equipment, calling to the others for help when she needed an extra pair of hands. Everyone else trickled down from the floors above as they finished their work for the day, and other than the break for pizza, they worked through until time to put the kids down to bed for the night. Nash soaked in the camaraderie, the joking, and teamwork. This group of random people had come together to make a family, and he loved being part of it. Ethan and Caleb had been his family for nearly 2 years now, the closest he'd had since his mother died when he was 17. Most of the women had welcomed him in as part of the trio of guys, at least superficially. However, the woman with the blonde curls and curvy body that made him want to pull her close, well, maybe he could settle for her being civil to him instead of rude. At least for now. He was so screwed. What was he thinking, staying so close to her? And then she looked up from the other end of the display they were putting together and smiled. It was like seeing her for the first time all over again. No way could he walk away from her if there was even a hint of a chance that she might let him in someday. He had tried going out with other women in the past 5 months, but no one else held a candle to her. He didn't have anything more to lose by waiting it out a little longer. She already had his heart.
5 by Friday Bennett was very pleased about how well things were going with Nash. She had managed not to say one snippy or sarcastic word to him in 3 days. Of course, she had only spent a little time around him each day, but still, bully for her. Now there was less than 2 hours left in the school year, and she found herself working alongside him to put up signs inside the building. Most of the displays had been set up in the past few days, but the vinyl banners they had each ordered for the area housing their work needed to go above each section. Wouldn't you know, between one thing and the next, the only person available to help her was Nash. They each stood on a ladder, holding Andrea's sign over the desk she'd installed in front of her photo studio. "I heard you ladies had a lead on someone to work down here most of the time. That's been a while. How's it going?" Bennett finished drilling the screw into the wall, leaving half an inch out for the grommet to go over. "Great, Tammy's starting part-time on opening day. If things go well, we'll expand her to full-time." Tammy was another woman they knew from the women's shelter classes who seemed to have gotten her life in order, but was struggling to cover all of her bills with her night job working fast food. "Good. I know you'd rather spend your time focusing on your actual craft instead of hawking the results." He says only one day before we all go to the spring festival to hawk our crafts. She tossed him what she hoped was an easy smile. Andrea picked up the flyers this morning. They look so beautiful. Nash waited for her to hook the banner's grommet on the screw, and then gave the banner a tug to straighten it, and marked the spot for his screw on the wall, and then double-checked the height from the ceiling to make sure it would be straight. That's totally cool. I can't wait to take the kids around and fill them full of cotton candy and popcorn. Bennett ignored the joke. She was very grateful that the 3 guys were willing to watch the kids, though she thought they were getting in over their heads. She planned to keep Grace with her at the table as much as possible. I'm sure they'll have a lot of fun. She stepped down from her A-frame ladder and moved it to the next section. Nash stepped onto the floor and folded his ladder to bring it over near hers. I was kind of surprised you would let Grace out of your sight that long. You're pretty protective of her. Not wanting to tell him how nervous the thought made her, Bennett pulled out the banner that would hang over Deirdre's soaps and kept her mouth closed. Wait a minute. You don't intend to let Grace walk around the festival, do you? She'll get a chance to look around. The women planned to take turns checking it out and make contacts with other craftswomen. You honestly don't trust us with your daughter, even though there are 3 of us. Nash looked stunned and a little offended. Feeling defensive, Bennett turned to face him, pulling the rolled banner against her chest. That's a lot of kids for you all to keep track of while you're wandering around an event that has thousands of people. We're 3 adult men with only 7 kids, and I might add, rather tough and security-conscious men at that. That's great. We all appreciate your willingness to help and how good you are with all of the kids. If Grace stays with me, then you each only have to keep track of 2 kids, which will be easier. Besides, Grace is almost 10, and she won't be half the handful as some of the other kids, which means it will be easy to add her to the group. Nash held his hands up in peace. Look, I'm sorry. It's none of my business how you raise your kid. If you don't trust us, then you should keep her close to you. His comment made her feel like a jerk. It's not that I wouldn't trust you to watch her in other circumstances. I know how protective you are, and that you would watch out for her. It's different in a crowd. That's something, anyway. He accepted the other end of the banner she had been clutching, and they both went up again to hang it. They worked in silence for several minutes before he turned the conversation to her recreation plans for summer, since this was the last day of school. They moved around the room, hanging the various banners and posters, until they got back around to what would be Bennett's area near the register. After they hung the banner, she got back up on the ladder with a poster she'd designed and had printed to go under the banner. A display was in the way, but she got as close as possible and leaned to the side to attach the removable glue strips to the wall. The ladder shifted slightly, and she adjusted her weight to keep it centered. The ladder slipped a little again, and she heard Nash say something about being careful only a second before the ladder slipped completely. A second later, she was caught in strong arms. Stunned, Bennett sucked in a deep breath before looking right into Nash's face, which was very, very close to hers. The clattering of the falling ladder stopped, and she let out a breath. "Hey, I said to be careful." His voice was low and a little hoarse. "Yeah, you okay?" Her head cleared enough to realize he still held her off the floor. Yeah. You can put me down now, I guess." "Right." Nash carefully released her feet, bending until they touched the floor. Their faces were still so close, his warm breath ghosting along her skin. His movements were normal speed, but she was so aware of him, of his well-muscled arms around her, his warm chest against her arm. Their eyes were locked together, and her heart went haywire, beating out a tattoo that might have been SOS. "Maybe you should keep both feet on the ground from now on," he said when she was standing, though he hadn't moved away. She didn't move either. Maybe so. She had never been so close to him, unless you counted their first meeting. He had grabbed her off the side porch when the guys were testing the security system for them. They had turned off the power to the building as a means of drawing out one of the women, and she'd been the one who'd gone out to see what was going on. But she didn't count that night. One of his hands came up and brushed the golden curls from her face. "Is your heart pounding half as hard as mine?" Harder. Bennett's brain had short-circuited in the fall. Gone. So, when she pushed up onto her toes, slid her arms around his neck, and kissed him, she could honestly say that it was all instinct. Not planned at all. His arms went around her waist, shot up the length of her back, and tightened around her as he joined in. Their lips not taking it soft and gentle, but all the pent-up chemistry pushing for more. He tasted of wintergreen gum and a hint of chocolate from the chocolate banana muffins Andrea had made them all for breakfast. His lips were firm and mobile, and as she tipped her head for more, a thought finally broke through her frozen mind. I could kiss this man forever. The words reverberated in her head until the sound of a phone beeping pierced the echo. The beeping lasted for several seconds before she realized it was the reminder that school was about to get out. Bennett pulled back and stared at Nash for at least 3 more seconds before finally releasing him to pick up her phone from the counter where the computer would sit. Nash's hands slid from her hips as she shifted away. Well, that's one way to work off adrenaline after you scared us both. Her fingers trembled as she silenced the alarm. She slid the phone into her back pocket. Right, well, yeah. Please tell me you aren't going to pretend that this never happened. She looked back at him, seeing his hands resting on his hips, and the expression of, was that vulnerability? I don't think I'm that good of an actor. But that doesn't mean that I know what comes next. Well, if you want my vote, he said as he moved closer. Bennett put a hand to his chest, easily stopping his forward progress. The last guy I was with pretended to be a good guy until we were married, and then he started hitting me. It wasn't exactly my first experience being someone's punching bag. I'm telling you this because you need to understand that this hesitance is ingrained, and it's not really about you. It's about me and my past. I'm not sure I'm ready to step into a new relationship. You deserve someone whose trust hasn't been completely messed with. She hadn't planned to be so honest, but he had to have considered the possibility that she'd been abused, knowing she had met the other women at a women's shelter. Besides, it was in no way her biggest secret. After that kiss, she needed to give him something, some small part of her truth. His voice was full of understanding and empathy when he answered. I get that. Believe me, I'd cut off my right arm before I hit a woman. Any man who would do that isn't really a man. You need a little time to process? Fine, I can give you that. But know that this between us feels like a whole lot more than I've had with anyone in a long time. So I'm in it, if you'll give it a chance. She didn't know if she dared believe him, but as far as she could tell, he hadn't lied to her yet, so she'd have to take his words at face value. Okay, I'll think about it, but right now I have to get the girls. It's my turn. I'll go along. No, you can watch from this side of the street. I think I need a few minutes to get my brain working again, and having you that close is not going to help my state of mind. A frown formed on Nash's fantastically skilled lips, but he nodded. Bennett pivoted toward the door and hurried out before he could say anything else. There was no reason to believe that the kids were in danger. They had a crossing guard. They could walk across on their own, but Bennett was grateful for the chance to think for a few minutes without looking like she was running away. Which she was, like a big old scaredy cat. Had she really started that kiss? The kiss to end all kisses, a kiss that had nearly blown her head off. If that was the kind of chemistry they had with just a first kiss, well... She smiled and greeted people around her, but her mind was mostly on Nash, who, she noticed when she took up the usual place by the school, had come out to watch her and the girls cross safely. The bell rang, letting the kids out for summer, and children streamed through the doors within seconds, laughing and talking and thrilled with the long summer ahead of them. Bennett grinned at the girls as they practically skipped to her, while part of her heart skipped along with them. She had finally kissed Nash Peters. Six Bennett managed to make it through the day without saying anything to her sisters about kissing Nash, though she must have been acting odd, because she received a few curious looks throughout the day. They had a little end-of-school party in the common area when the girls got home, And then Sheila and Andrea had taken the kids all up to the play area they had created on the roof. They were in the middle of building their own park up there, a safe space where they could play or relax without looking over their shoulders. She finally got Grace into bed that night and spent a little time clearing up the kitchen with the door open to the main hall. Bennett saw Sheila pass her door, and then the door to the stairwell clanged shut. She must be going down to work in her shop. Feeling itchy and wanting to talk to someone, especially someone who had been through at least part of what she had been through, she grabbed the baby monitor and headed down behind Sheila. Bennett used her key card to go through the front of Vanna's office to the secret door that led to the pool, garage, the back of the store, and Sheila's shop. Though they had insulated the shop against sound, some of the noises would sneak through the door to this hall if Sheila was actually welding, so Bennett felt safe to open the door and peek in. Sheila had her strawberry blonde hair braided back away from her face as she always did when welding. She was still wearing street clothes and leaned over the enormous stainless steel table, drawing on it with a piece of soapstone. She glanced up, her freckles standing out against her creamy white skin. "What's up? You've been acting odd all day." "Have I?" Bennett considered that an invitation and walked in the rest of the way. "I thought I was hiding it so well." "Nope." "Too quiet. Did you and Nash have a big fight when you worked together this morning?" "Nope. Well, we had a few words, but they weren't really fighting words, and they wouldn't have affected me for the rest of the day. Not the part about her trusting Grace to the guys the next day anyway. So, what was it? I'm assuming you came down here to talk about it. Do you mind? I know you've been up to your elbows in kids today and have orders to fill." Sheila set aside the soapstone and headed for the mini fridge she'd bought for cold drinks, since she could get hot and sweaty when she worked. She pulled out a couple bottles of water and tossed one to Bennett. Using one foot, she pulled a stool out from the table and sat, gesturing to another one. "Hit me." Where to start?" Bennett took the offered stool, which was stainless steel and not particularly comfortable, but practical in a welding shop. "So, after we hung the banners, I hung the sign over my space, the one with the cute little lambs that's totally unrealistic." "That's a great poster," Sheila said. "I was leaning over too much and the ladder collapsed. Nash had come over to lecture me on safety and caught me." "Ooh, is this going to be a kissing story?" Bennett felt her face heat. "I'm not actually sure how it happened, but I think I initiated it." Sometimes you just can't wait for the guy, especially when he's being a gentleman, but now you're worried about it. How was the kiss, by the way?" "So good. So good. No man has a right to kiss that well." Bennett downed a third of the water bottle, her mouth suddenly dry. "And now you're tied up in knots because it wasn't a deliberate decision you made. Coming from an abusive relationship isn't helping." "Right. And he's part of the fabric of this place now. If things go badly between us, or if he turns out not to be what he seems—" "You mean if he ends up being an abusive bastard like your ex, your dad, your mom?" "Ethan would kick him somewhere extra painful and send him packing, if you, me, and the rest of us didn't get to it first." Bennett let out a half laugh, part of her tension sliding off her shoulders. "I know you all have my back, but it's more than that. It always is. But is he anything like James? And I don't mean career-wise, but his other behaviors? No, not even a little. But we're not in a real relationship right now. So it's hard to know how that could change." Sheila drank some water and then played with the bottle cap. "That's true. The question is, are you going to let your fear stop you from seeing if maybe, just maybe, you've finally found someone who's worthy of your love? Or are you going to overcome your fears? Be fearless, to quote your own power word. Or at least push through it until you can trust him and yourself enough to let the fear go." Bennett tapped her index finger on the plastic water bottle. "It wasn't easy for you to put the past and your relationship with Rod behind you, was it?" "Not at all. But there was Ethan, standing in front of me, ready to be my partner. I finally realized I was limiting myself by not giving us a chance, that he deserved the chance, and so did I. If you and Nash don't work out, that's fine. No harm, no foul. If he hurts you, he'll pay. But if you hurt both of you because you refuse to even give yourself a chance, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened. Sheila took a long drink from her bottle, emptying it, squashing it, and tossing it into the recycle bin next to the garbage can. Besides, any guy who can kiss that well should definitely be put to use once in a while, and I don't think he's dated anyone else in ages. You're saying I owe it to all womankind to kiss him as often as possible, so his skills aren't wasted? Bennett grinned. At least the single ladies. I get plenty of great kissing from Ethan already. Bennett sat for a moment, considering Sheila's advice before standing. Thanks, I appreciate it. No problem. Sheila stood and picked up her soapstone again. And Bennett, no one is going to blame you if you decide you aren't ready to start dating again. Not even Nash. Thanks. Bennett left the shop and headed back to her place, mulling over Sheila's words. No one else would blame or hate her if she decided not to date Nash, besides maybe herself. Nash would be disappointed, but she already knew him well enough to be sure that though it would hurt him, he wouldn't hold a grudge. Would he? And did she want to be responsible for hurting both him and herself? That left one question. Could she be fearless when all signs showed that the way was safe enough? 7. The weather was perfect for the spring festival, low 70s with only the slightest breeze and plenty of sun, a nice change from the nearly constant clouds that usually blanketed northeastern Kansas in the spring. Bennett stayed busy talking to people passing through the craft bazaar section of the festival, discussing her wool skeins, felted items, and her sister's craftsmanship. They were quick to refer people back and forth to each other, and to pass out a flyer with their business's grand opening information and web address. As their resident computer geek, Deirdre had been busily building the site for the past few months between other projects. Grace had been helping Bennett with flyers for a while when the guys circled through the crowd with the rest of the kids. They had opted to come later while the sisters set up their booths and settled in. Grace, come with us. We're going to see the baby sheep, Seelan called to her. Can I, Mom? I know we're going to see some things later, but can I go with them for a while? Please. Grace turned her pale blue eyes on Bennett. Torn, Bennett looked at her daughter and then the guys. Nash said nothing, but his expression was nearly as pleading as Grace's. He had proved that he was trustworthy. Hadn't he? Putting that trust to the test, she looked back at Grace. Okay, but hold on. There are rules. First, you pick one of those men to stay with and don't wander off. Grace squealed in excitement and hopped in next to Nash. Of course, she would pick him. I'm serious. You stay close enough to reach out and touch him. Second, don't talk to anyone who smells like bologna. And third, have fun. Grace laughed. Of course I will. Okay. Bennett raised a finger and stared down the guys. Death to all three of you if she or any of the others get hurt or lost. Already got the threats this morning, Caleb said, shifting 3-year-old Devin in his arms. Vanna's scarier than you. Liar. Go have fun. She shooed them away, and with a chorus of goodbyes to their moms and sweethearts, the group of 10 wandered off. I thought you were going to say no for a moment there, Deirdre said. You keep your little one close? For good reason. Anyway, she was already getting bored, and that leads only to annoyance and misery. For both of us. Nash would take care of her, especially after their discussion the previous day. An hour passed, and Bennett was talking to a young woman about the wool in the yarns she was considering when Nash showed up carrying Bobby. Enormous tears rolled down Bobby's dark cheeks. Someone tripped and couldn't be consoled without his mama, he said, passing the toddler to Andrea. Where's Grace? Bennett asked with welling panic when she noticed he was alone. She and the girls are riding in the Ferris wheel with Caleb while Ethan is force-feeding the other 2 boys ice cream. I'm sure he's having a very hard time of it, Mina said with a snort. I know how much Devin hates ice cream. Yes, but he's taking it like a man. Bennett looked back at her customer, who had been debating over the peacock blue and the true blue skeins of wool. You could always get some of both and do 2 projects, she said teasingly. You're right. Let's do it. She started counting out the skeins as she put them into a canvas bag she'd brought with her and passed over a stack of 20s. Doing an inner boogie, Bennett made change and was about to count it back to the customer when she heard her name. Bennett, is that you? Bennett glanced up at a woman who looked vaguely familiar, for 3 seconds, and then her memory came slamming back. Tiffany? Her hands froze, and it took her customer clearing her throat before Bennett turned back to her and passed along the change, thanking her. It may have only been a few seconds, but Bennett's mind had come up with dozens of questions, and she wasn't sure which one to handle first. "Do you live around here?" was the one that emerged. "No. I was visiting my brother Kobe. He's stationed on base in Leavenworth. What about you? I haven't seen or heard anything about you in years, not since you ran away." "Yeah, I'm great. What are you up to these days?" She didn't really care, she just didn't want to talk about herself. She hoped Tiffany didn't pick up a flyer about their grand opening. Tiffany skimmed over college, her new husband, and her corporate job in Baltimore. "I was sorry to hear about your dad." "Thanks." Bennett had no clue what had happened to her dad, and couldn't care less. "It must be hard losing him all of a sudden like that. I know your mom was devastated." Losing someone you love is always gut-wrenching. Bennett wasn't thinking of her dad, but of her sister and brother-in-law. Nash was still at the table next to hers, probably waiting to take Bobby back when Andrea calmed him down, and he was paying very close attention to the conversation. Deirdre on the other side, whose soaps Tiffany had been looking over, seemed unduly curious as well. "Go away, go away, go away," Bennett chanted in her head. What were the odds that someone who knew her from high school in Baltimore would stumble across her here and actually recognize her? "Oh my gosh," Comfrey walked up to Bennett's table. "I love these new colors. Are any of them from my sheep?" She picked up a couple of skeins. Bennett gave Tiffany half a wave and turned her whole focus on Comfrey. Never so grateful to see the blonde who had started her on the path of spinning wool into yarn in the first place. "No, I haven't processed your bags yet, but I'll set some aside for you when I have. What color do you like best?" Tiffany bought a few of Deirdre's soaps, a pair of earrings from Mina, and a framed print from Andrea before continuing to the next booth space. Nash hung around until after Comfrey had moved on to Deirdre's table before asking in a low voice, "Are you okay? You're super tense." "I'm fine. We can talk about it later." Except this could be the end of her comfortable world. She seriously needed to decide if it was time to start over again. She was so glad that she had sent Grace with the men after all. "Keep Grace away, will you? Take her home with the others." His brows lowered in confusion. "I can do that. Are you sure everything's all right?" She nodded, but as she considered leaving these people who had become her family, her heart broke a little.
Searching for Bennett, Nash looked in on each of the women, Bennett's shop, and the retail space on the first floor, before he checked the roof that evening after the kids had been put to bed. Bennett had put on a brave front all afternoon, but after the woman from her past had shown up, Bennett had never quite returned to herself. That had been above and beyond the fact that she didn't want Grace at the booth with her. She had refused to talk about it earlier, and he hadn't pushed too hard. But now he would do his best to get her to open up. The women were in the process of turning the roof into their own small park with a grassy area right off the stairwell, dotted with trees that would spread their boughs in future years to provide plenty of shade. Beyond that was a hard surface for roller skating and chalk drawing. Past that was a basketball, volleyball, tennis court with an adjustable net. And even further beyond that were some garden beds where they were growing flowers and vegetables. The previous summer they had each tended plots in the community garden, which they could look down on from the roof, but this was more secure and convenient with the kids playing on the roof anyway. This last section was where he found Bennett, standing next to the raised beds they had created, training the new bean and cucumber vines onto the lattices they had placed there for support. Her eyes and nose were red, and she had tears tracking down her cheeks as she worked. She had to have heard the door slam shut when it closed behind him, but she didn't acknowledge that he was there. He crossed the sports court and opened the gate on the other side, approaching slowly while she moved from plant to plant. When he reached her, he stopped a few feet back, listening to her sniffle. Her shoulders were stiff and angry. She knew he was there, so he decided to wait and let her open the conversation first. It took several minutes, but eventually Bennett asked, "Are you just going to stand there and watch me ugly cry?" "There's nothing ugly about that face of yours, even if you are crying. That must have been a shock, running into someone you knew from home." "That wasn't a home." And that was a very telling answer. Nash waited for her to speak again. Bennett moved to the next garden bed. The plants were still quite short, so there was only so much she could do for each of them. A long moment passed. "You just wait a person out, don't you? I don't want to date you, so you just wait there, in my life, and gorgeously sucking up all of the air until I don't have any choice but to pay attention. Now you're quietly waiting for me to talk, but I don't talk about that part of my past. But you will." He knew she wanted to, needed to, after the turmoil had been pressed down inside her all day. If she didn't, she wouldn't be talking now. When she shifted to a third bed, he took a few steps to follow her, staying several feet away, but just inside her periphery. "Fine," she whirled to face him. "I thought I was safe here. I thought I was far enough from home that I would never see anyone I knew. I should have stayed home instead of going to fairs. What was I thinking? All this time I thought you were hiding from your ex. What are you really hiding from?" She rubbed her hands together to brush off the soil mix they had put in the garden beds. "I am hiding from my ex, and there's a reason I never ever talk about before I moved to Kansas. Not to anyone. I'm not just anyone." That was true, and yet whatever they were, it would take a major leap to for her tell him something she would normally never discuss. "I was married to James, and I never talked about my past with him other than to say I'm not in contact with my family by choice and want nothing to do with them." You knew, even then, that he wasn't trustworthy. He didn't care about your past because he wanted you isolated, dependent totally on him. He was probably glad you didn't have close family connections. That's how abusers work. But that's not how I work. You come with a big family right here, and I love them like you do. If there's actually a threat that could show up on your doorstep, we need to be ready for it. Bennett shook her head. "No, you refuse to discuss it, or no, no one else is at risk. Just me and Grace. I can't stay here. Not if there's a chance." She turned to face him as more tears gilded her cheeks. Nash stepped forward and brushed at the tears. Some men considered tears emotional blackmail, a way for a woman to bend someone else to their will. Perhaps some women were that calculated, but Bennett had come up here to cry alone. She didn't want to bring anyone else into her personal misery, and she was willing to leave rather than bring it down on anyone else. "You never talk about your parents. And other than saying that they were mean drunks who did worse than James did to me, I won't talk about them again. I'm not sorry that my father is dead." But she let out a little sob. Nash pulled her against him, wrapping her in his arms. He didn't know if she was sad that things had ended so badly between them, sad that he hadn't been the kind of father she had needed, or just terrified that everything was going to fall down around her, but it didn't matter. "Did you know about him before today?" "No, I have no idea when or how, and it doesn't matter. I don't really care." But she rubbed her cheek against his tea and wrapped her arms around him, seeking comfort. He held her like that for a long time while the crickets made music 6 stories below them and the stars twinkled above. Finally, when he was sure she wanted to pull away, he asked, "Do you really have to leave? What are you hiding from?" "Don't ask me. I can't." She turned her face into his chest for a long moment. "Okay, you can't talk about it yet." He'd always been facing an uphill battle with her. Clearly there was even more hill than he'd realized. "Just don't take off without taking tonight to think it over. We can discuss it in the morning." "What is there to discuss?" Her words were muffled against his chest. "You don't honestly think your sisters are going to let you disappear, do you? Whatever came before this, now you have people who love you and will worry about you. Just tell me this. If your dad is dead, is there someone else out there who might try to hurt you?" Several seconds passed before she shook her head. "Then what's the threat?" The silence made the crickets sound louder than ever. "Okay." Nash wanted so badly to demand that she tell him so he could fix it, but maybe whatever it was couldn't be fixed in the traditional sense of the word. Demanding would never work with her. He'd have to wait for her to trust him enough to tell him the truth on her own. Bennett took in one last deep breath and then pulled away from him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to blubber all over you." "It's fine. My shirt can survive a few tears. You don't have to tell me or anyone else what's going on, but if you don't, then we won't be able to help you." "You can't help. Are you sure?" He had to hold back a smile when she hesitated. Maybe there was hope after all. "Just sleep on it. Eat a good breakfast, and then we'll discuss it in the morning." "You think eating breakfast and sleeping will make it all better?" "No, but I think the stress of seeing that woman earlier, skipping meals, and being worn out can contribute to making everything seem worse than it already is. I'm hoping after you have a little time to process it, you'll find some solution to your problem that won't require you to pick up and move. You know we have your back. Some things can't be fixed. I know." He'd learned that many times over the years, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try to keep her around if they could do so safely. "Just promise you won't leave without telling everyone goodbye," he said. She nodded. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Okay, is there anything I can do for you tonight?" "No, I'm good." She headed for the stairs. "Good night." "Good night." He watched her go, then retrieved the basketball from the enclosed bin of toys they kept on the roof and headed for the court. Maybe if he ran layups for a while, he'd be able to burn off this itchy feeling, the one that kept whispering that he was going to lose her before they had a real chance together.
8. As Bennett washed the breakfast dishes the next morning, she only spared a few seconds of annoyance about the fact that Nash had been right. A night to process, some good sleep, and food had definitely helped improve her outlook. On the other hand, it didn't come close to fixing her problem. If Tiffany told anyone she had seen Bennett, which she totally would, someone might come looking for her. Okay, maybe they wouldn't anymore. She was 25, and as far as she could tell, no one knew about Grace, so there was no reason for them to come looking. On the other hand, Tiffany had taken the flyer about their grand opening, so she'd be able to find Bennett if someone wanted to. The only one who knew the truth had been Bennett's best friend, Leslie. Had Leslie told someone? That was the big thing that made Bennett feel like grabbing her daughter and running. But maybe there was a way to stay where she was and still be safe. To do that, though, she might have to tell someone the truth. There was a knock at her door. It would be Nash because no one else had any reason to flout the unofficial rule that a closed apartment door meant they wanted to be left alone. He had been trying to get through all kinds of her doors lately, and succeeding more than she liked to admit. Bennett opened the door and gestured him in as she greeted him. Grace came out of her room and grinned. "Hi, Nash. We're going to play hopscotch, and this afternoon Mom's taking us swimming." "Sounds like fun. Maybe I'll come up and challenge you to a game later," he said, running a hand over her silky curls. "You're silly. See you later, Mom." Grace headed next door to Sheila's to get Chelsea. "Have fun." Bennett was doubly glad that they had the roof and 5-foot railings so they could let the older girls go up and play without supervision for a while. "Good, then we can talk." Nash shut the apartment door. Bennett let out a deep breath. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said, that if I tell someone, maybe they can help me. Just so you know, I meant me when I said that. But if you want to pick one of your sisters, I'll try to accept that." He flashed her a cocky grin. Smiling despite herself, Bennett gestured to the sofa as she took the armchair. "I haven't so much as whispered this to anyone since I ran away. I talked in therapy about James, but I don't talk about before I met James. I didn't tell him much about that either. I'm honored that you would tell me any of it then. You don't have to give me all of the details, but some basic ones will make helping you easier." "Right." She stood back up, unable to sit still as she tried to figure out which information to give him and which she could leave out. She walked over to the window and pulled back the blinds a little to look out, then crossed back to him while he sat there, maddeningly patient. "My parents were mean drunks, and they liked to drink a lot. Maybe not so much when I was little, but by the time I was 10, them getting drunk and fighting and taking it out on each other and us was a regular occurrence." Us? My sister, Nadine, and I. She was 4 years older than me. She married Jax when she was fresh out of high school, and he had just finished his bachelor's degree. He got a good job doing something with computers, and she became pregnant almost immediately. They also took me in. Whoa. Yeah, officially I was still living with my parents. The school thought so anyway, but I lived with Nadine and Jax all through her pregnancy and their baby girl's first months. She continued pacing the small room, anxious not just because she was telling someone the truth, but because she tried not to think about her past if she could help it. There were too many mixed-up emotions and pain wrapped into it. You're using past tense for all of them. Nash always had caught on to the small details. It was amazing living with them. They were happy together, fought rarely, and were so good to me. It was the first time I'd ever had stability, and my grades improved a lot. I was happier than I'd ever been. They had a boat, or rather, his parents had left him a boat when they died. Anyway, Jax and Nadine loved taking out the boat on the ocean and went as often as possible. One day, a freak storm popped up while they were out. I had stayed home, though I often went with them. They radioed in to the Coast Guard when they couldn't get their engine started and saw the storm was worse than expected, but help didn't get there fast enough. Bennett turned to look at Nash and saw the empathy and understanding in his eyes. "Tell me." A huge wave must have flipped the boat because it was on its side and they were nowhere to be found. An officer found me at home and told me. After 2 days of searching, everyone accepted that they all drowned in the storm. Nash's eyes narrowed. They didn't find any bodies. Jax's body was found the next day and a couple of days later. She struggled, hating this part as much now as she had at the time. They found part of Nadine. Apparently a great white or something found her first. The baby was accepted as lost at sea. She was only a few months old. There was a long moment of silence before Nash spoke. "I'm sorry, that must have been horrible for you. Did you have to move back home?" Bennett had thought she could tell him about Grace, but now that they were at the point, the horror of losing Nadine and Jax had resurfaced, along with the terror that if anyone found out that Grace was the missing baby, she would be taken away. Her mouth wouldn't form the words. "I would have, but I ran instead. I couldn't go back. I headed west, and kept heading until I ended up here, eventually. I don't want contact with anyone from my past. My father may be gone, but my mother is apparently still alive. I don't want her anywhere near me or Grace. The thought that she might find us is scarier than James coming after me again." Nash's brow furrowed, but he didn't ask any questions. "You know we'd protect you both if she came here." "They would try." "I know, but there are some things you can't protect me from." His eyes narrowed in understanding. "Because that's not the whole story?" Dang it, why did he have to read her so well? "We've barely started to be civil. I'm not telling you every little secret." He didn't move at all, but it felt as if he had shifted back, away from her when he answered. "Fair enough. Would you feel better if we found out what your mom was up to? If she's still living in Baltimore and working there, she won't have any real reason to come looking for you." She considered that for a moment. "Surprisingly, that thought does make me feel better. And besides, what are the chances that Tiffany has any connection to my mom? Her family moves in totally different circles than ours did. Give me a list of people to check into and we'll go from there." She pulled out a notebook and got to work. She would feel safer if her mom was dead or had moved out of that area after her husband died. A clean break from all contacts in Baltimore would be best, but she would have to wait and see.
Nash headed up to the office to do the search on his computer, since he had a Tor browser installed and didn't necessarily want to be tracked. It was Sunday, so they technically had the day off, but Ethan was at his desk anyway. Ethan's brother, Jared, had been making contacts with companies for them, selling their services in Houston and St. Louis, cities where he did business for their father's company anyway. He was still schmoozing some of those potential clients to get their business. "Can't wait to get back to work on those camera plans?" Ethan asked when Nash pulled back his chair. "Actually, I'm doing some research for Bennett." Nash sat and logged onto his computer. "She can't look for wool carding techniques on her own?" Ethan asked. He waited a moment for Nash's smile before going on. But really, Sheila said she was spooked after she ran into someone she knew yesterday. That's why I'm doing the research. We'll see what pops. There was no way they could keep this all from the group for long, but Nash would help her keep her secrets for a little while anyway. Ethan eyed him curiously. Anything I can help with? Not right now. I'll let you know if that changes. Nash knew his friend wouldn't pry. Ethan was familiar enough with the women's desire for privacy to not push. They worked side by side in silence for more than 2 hours, Nash referring back to his notes as he researched everyone on Bennett's list. Finally, he sat back and reviewed the notes he'd made. "What's the verdict?" Ethan asked. "Depends on connections. Could you try vaguing that up a bit? It was a little too detailed for me." "Not my story to tell." Nash pushed print and grabbed the pages as they popped out. "I'll encourage her to talk to everyone, but that's up to her. Our women can sure be tight-lipped sometimes." Nash liked the sound of that. Our women. They learned it in a hard school. "You about done with the bid for the Kramer job?" "Yeah, I'll send it out tomorrow morning. Less likely it'll get buried in junk mail if it hits their inbox after they're already in the office." "Good. Here's hoping." Nash headed back downstairs, swiping his card to get onto the second floor and hearing the beeping on a couple of phones alerting the women to a man on the floor. He understood their nervousness and concern. None of them had a glowing history, though they weren't exactly open about their pasts. He waved to Mina as he passed her open doorway and then knocked on the door jamb when he came to Bennett's. She stood at the stove stirring something in a pot. She looked up and smiled. "Results already?" "Some anyway. I'll do more digging if we decide it's necessary." He set the pages on the table. "Where's Grace?" "She and Chelsea gave up on playing outside a while ago and are in the common rooms playing board games. We'll swim after lunch." Nash closed the door to the hall and they sat next to each other on the sofa. "You want to read all the details, or do you want the short summary?" "Summarize. I'll read the rest later if I decide I want to know." "Okay, your dad died driving drunk 2 years ago. He hit another car and injured them, but they were lucky and the injuries were minor. Your mom joined AA. Seems to have stuck, or she's hiding it well. She posted a picture of her 1-year coin a few months back. She's working as an office manager in Brooklyn Park, current on her bills, and slowly paying off debt. Good for her." Bennett's voice was flat and unreadable. "Tiffany's parents moved away from Baltimore a few years back. Her brother is still there, but on the other side of town. I can't tell that there's a connection between them, but it's possible. A couple of the women you said were besties with Tiffany in the past are still in town, but I didn't see much evidence on their Facebook posts that they're in regular contact with each other. Could be in Messenger, though. I'll have to dig more to see if there's any kind of connection between them, their family, and your mom, but I think you're safe for a little while at least. You don't do social media, and your daughter's pictures aren't out in public. I think someone would have to come all the way up here to see you before they'd catch a glimpse of her. You didn't have her with you when Tiffany stopped at your booth yesterday, so you should be safe there." Bennett nodded, looking relieved. "Okay, it's not like we're out and about a lot. Maybe it'll be fine." Her voice lifted, turning that last one into a question. Nash slid his hand into hers. "You know you're better off with this family around you than on your own." "I know." She tapped her thumb against his knuckle. "I don't want to go anywhere. I just don't want to lose Grace. I can handle losing anyone else, everything else, if I have to, but I can't lose her. No one has any reason to take her away from you. She's your daughter." Nash slid an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against him. He wished she would explain what exactly she was afraid of in regard to her mom. He'd seen pictures of the woman, and she didn't seem like she would do more damage than the average-sized man. "Tell me about your family." Nash realized he probably hadn't told her anything, except for vague, random comments about his mom from time to time. Considering what she'd shared with him, he owed her some truths of his own. "My parents only dated for a little while before she found out she was pregnant with me. He split right off, not wanting to be saddled with a kid. She tried to tell me that he just wasn't ready, that he had things he had to work out, but the truth is, that he's a selfish prick. I never met him when I was growing up, and he rarely paid child support. Mom worked really hard to pay the bills alone. It was just her and me against the world in our pitiful barrio apartment. This place is way nicer than anywhere we ever lived. I worked down the street as a stock boy once I was old enough to get a job. It helped buy groceries anyway. His throat ached when he thought of how hard his mother worked to support them, how tired she must have been all of the time. But she loved you? Just like you love Gracie. It's one of the things that I like best about you. Bennett smiled. What happened to her? She had big dreams for me, which helped me see a future where I could make something real with my life. By the time I reached high school, we talked a lot about college and scholarships. I got decent grades, not spectacular, but by the time I hit junior year, I was working 2 part-time jobs, so there wasn't a lot of time for homework. Anyway, Mom was first-generation Nicaraguan American, so there were scholarships out there for me, and we started talking about me joining the Army to help pay for school. Then at the end of my junior year, Mom got sick. We didn't have insurance, so she put off going to the doctor until I had to practically carry her to the ER. Turns out she had meningitis. They did everything they could, but they couldn't save her. Bennett's arms sneaked around him, holding him close. That must have been horrible. What did you do? Where did you go? My grandparents were gone. My uncles were still in Nicaragua, so I ended up in foster care. It wasn't the worst place. The people were nice enough, but they weren't my mom, and their house was locked down big time with cameras and everything. That's weird. Most of the boys they had there were troubled. Not so much that they should be in juvie, but enough to need more structure. I looked at my options. I would turn 18 in October, so I talked to a recruiter. He said he could only take me if I had a diploma, so I spent the summer burning through the last few classes for my GED and took the test in August. 2 days after I turned 18, I was released from state custody and headed to boot camp. That's so much change and craziness. It must have been hard. She was one to talk. The first few months were awful, so awful. I blamed myself for not making her go to the doctor sooner and being a bad son. Mom made me promise to get an education, to do something better with my life. So after I worked through the first tidal wave of grief, I did. That first couple of years, my life sucked most of the time. Losing Mom, all of the changes, and I wasn't really ready to be in the military. That life was a big shock to the system, but I got through it thanks to Ethan and some of the other guys. And now here I am. He looked down at her, more grateful than he could say that she held on to him during the difficult retelling. With you. Mom was right. There was something special waiting for me. He leaned down and kissed her, thrilled that her hesitation lasted only an instant before she kissed him back. Seeing her for the first time was like being hit by a bag of bricks, but being with her like this, even this innocent tangle, was the happiest he'd been in years. If she decided to run, he would have to run with her. No way was he giving her up unless she gave him absolutely no choice. He drew her closer and deepened the kiss, pulling back with reluctance only when the door opened and Grace entered. Chelsea said you would be kissing. She gave them a knowing smirk. Sheila and Ethan do it all the time when they think no one's around to see. She heaved out a sigh and crossed her arms over her chest, rolling her eyes. I like kissing her, Nash said, holding on to Bennett when she tried to pull away. You okay with that? Grace seemed to consider for a moment. I guess you're pretty cool, way better than James. Just don't kiss me. What? Nash let Bennett pull away this time and stood, snatching up Grace and slinging her over his shoulder, tickling her stomach. Is this better? She giggled as he poked her belly a few times. Stop, put me down. Grinning, he leaned over and deposited her back on her feet. Fine. No kissing and no tickling. I gotcha. How about fist bumps? Are those still okay? Of course. She held out a fist in invitation and he bumped his against it. Sounds good. Now let's see what your mom has on the stove. He headed over to check out what was in the pot. Is that your way of begging for a lunch invitation? Bennett asked. It's my semi-subtle way. I can straight out beg if you like. He lifted the pan lid and found chicken and vegetable soup bubbling away. For this, I'll beg on my knees. I'd like to see that sometime, but I'll spare you today. It'll be ready by the time you set the table. Mina made it. She just told me to heat it through. Nash grinned, despite the worry that still ate at him that she would pick up and run. Nash kept close tabs on Tiffany and any mention of Bennett's name online. He also used every minute that could be construed as being his own to help the women with the final work on the retail space downstairs, working late at his desk to make up the time after the others had gone to bed. They brought down inventory that the women had spent the past several months creating between finishing orders for other clients, working on the building, and riding herd on the kids. The other women asked Bennett if everything was okay several times, but she just put them off and said she was tired but excited. And yet, whenever the kids wanted to help them set up downstairs, Bennett kept Grace upstairs and out of sight. Nash wished she had told him everything, because there was obviously something more to this issue than she'd told him. The grand opening was scheduled for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. By Tuesday afternoon, the store was mostly ready to go, and everyone looked thoroughly done in. "So, I was thinking pizza party on the roof," Nash said to Bennett when he checked in on them after finishing his project at work. "I don't think I can handle those stairs after the day I've had." She brushed the sweaty blonde curls back from her face. "No problem. We can take the back way to the main elevator, straight up to the roof. The work crew is already heading home. In another 20 minutes it'll be empty. Come on, you, me, and the squirt makes 3. What kind of party only has 3 people?" She gave him a narrow-eyed glare, but her lips were slightly upturned, giving her away. "A private party. Come on, you know you need some quiet time without all the confusion, and fresh air will do us all some good. What if everyone else has the same idea? Don't tell them we're going and it'll be fine. Maybe. Come on, you know you want to." Bennett's lips quirked up and she nodded. "Fine, I'll sneak Grace up in a few minutes. I'll go get the pizza. It should be ready about the time I get there." "Pretty sure of yourself?" "I figured food you didn't have to cook would help, and if that wasn't enough, I'd get Grace to back me up." He gave her hand a quick squeeze and headed for the garage. The run to the pizza place went quickly, and the last of the construction workers' trucks were headed out of the back lot when Nash pulled through to park in the garage. A few minutes later, he exited the stairwell onto the roof with the pizza, a bag with sodas on one arm, and a blanket on the other. "Pizza!" Grace yelled from where she had been playing hopscotch. She took 3 final hops and landed triumphantly on the other side before zooming over to join them. "Picnic style?" Bennett asked when she saw the blanket. "Yes, and I'm reasonably confident that we won't have any ants trying to carry off dinner." "You think so, do you?" Bennett took the blanket from his full arms and shook it out, spreading it on the grass where it would get partial shade from the small trees they had planted that spring. "You need tables and umbrellas out here," Nash suggested. "Good idea. I'll talk to the others." "Yeah, Mom, 'cause then we could play board games and color up here," Grace said. "That's true, if it's not too windy." Only a light breeze ruffled Bennett's hair as she spoke, though a few fluffy clouds moved quickly above them. They settled on the blanket, eating pizza in their fingers and grinning when a butterfly fluttered past. It landed on a nearby flower for a moment before lifting off again, headed for the back of the roof. "I love butterflies. They're one of those magical gifts of summer that always gave me hope." Bennett rolled onto her back and looked up into the sky. "I wish I could just grab this moment and hold it close forever." Nash brushed the hair away from Bennett's face, needing to touch her. It was a relief to see the stress and wariness slide from her face, and Nash made a mental note to do something like this more often. The women had created this haven so they'd have somewhere to get away to, without the risk of being approached by someone looking for a handout from the lotto winners. However, they were so busy they rarely came up unless they were accompanying the kids, and since Sheila had finished fencing off the entire roof a couple of weeks earlier, they didn't always accompany the older girls anymore. "If you had an entire day to go anywhere you wanted, where would you go?" Nash asked when he had set aside the leftover pizza and put the rest of the garbage into a bag. "Disneyland," Grace said without a pause. Okay, we'll pretend travel isn't an issue. Nash agreed. Disneyland for the squirt. What about you, Bennett? Well, with the caveat that travel wouldn't be an issue, I guess I'd have to say Paris or Rome, or maybe Venice. Take your pick. One vote for Europe. Good call. Those all sound good. Nash leaned back on his hands, enjoying the falling sun on his face. Where would you pick? Bennett asked. Right here with you. But no way could he say that without wigging her out. I've always wanted to go to Greece, see the Parthenon, and eat some baklava. Because baklava will taste completely different if you're at the Parthenon, Bennett nodded. Of course. I know what the Parthenon is. It's a temple for the goddess Athena. Well, it was, but now it's just some broken down stones. Grace picked an olive slice from next to her on the blanket and tossed it away into the grass. Yeah, but it's good to remember people who came before us and understand them, Nash said. Why? They died like 1,000 years ago. 2, but who's counting? Because they were moms and dads and kids and pets. They went to school and worshipped and worked. They were more like us than you might think, and they didn't have big cranes and stuff to build their buildings. You remember how they had a crane lift all of the dirt and stuff up here? Yeah, it was cool. Well, they had to lift all of those big heavy stones without the machines we use. It's pretty amazing. Grace licked some sauce off her finger. I guess that is pretty cool. Can I go play now? Go ahead, Bennett chuckled. That was all Grace needed to jump up and return to her hopscotch. I don't think she was nearly as impressed with your knowledge as I am, Bennett said to Nash. That's okay. How could I ever compete with hopscotch? Not much does these days. Bennett lay back against the blanket, staring into the sky. I remember playing hopscotch with my sister, and jumping ropes, double dutch, playing with our tiny Polly Pockets that a neighbor gave us for Christmas one year. I'm glad she's enjoying at least some of the things I did at her age. She's a great kid. You know I'm crazy about her, almost as crazy as I am about her mom. The breeze blew some hairs across Bennett's face and Nash brushed them away, enjoying the softness of her skin under his fingers. The woman was so beautiful it nearly took his breath away when he saw her like this, all relaxed and happy. Thanks, I needed this. We've been so focused on the business. Which you should be, but we all need a break sometimes. I wanted to take you on a real date, but I figured this would be the best I could do for a while, considering everything. Are you still watching for any sign that someone's talking about me? Bennett asked softly. Yeah, so far so good. But that doesn't mean she let it go, does it? Nash wished he could lie, but she deserved better. No, it doesn't. I need to review my backup plan in case someone comes looking for me. I'm already working on it, but he hoped they would never need it. The fact that she already had one that had been set for a while told him how serious she was about getting lost if her past came back to haunt her. He just wished he understood why.
Bennett looked at her display of wool, yarn, and felted items in the store Thursday afternoon. It had seemed like she had so much when it was in boxes and bins in her shop upstairs, but laid out like this, it was less substantial than she'd expected. That was okay. Next week, after the grand opening was over, she would have more time to work upstairs instead of putting most of her workday into getting the store up and running. She brushed a hand over the brightly colored yarns, the soft, fancy scarves, and the tiny felted booties. Pride welled up. This was her handiwork, her blood, sweat, and tears, sometimes literally. Even if nothing sold from the store, she had a growing following online, and it wasn't like she needed the money, only the satisfaction. Beautiful, Deirdre said as she brought in another load of soaps in a collapsible wagon. Yours looks pretty great, too. Bennett glanced at the section to her right, where Deirdre's soaps were lined up like a rainbow, stacks of each scent and pattern arranged in a stair-step so you could easily see them all. You've worked harder than I thought on your inventory lately. Since I have to let my custom mixes cure for over a month before they're ready to sell, I've mostly been doing melt and pour the past few weeks. I can't wait to get back to normal life. Tell me about it. Bennett helped Deirdre unload her wagon, placing the soaps where directed. Andrea came down and disappeared into her photo studio, and Sheila rolled in a dolly with a box of iron decorations she'd been working on. Everything was just about done. Excitement and nerves danced in Bennett's stomach as she thought of what would come the next day. The grand opening. She hoped people would come. By 5 o'clock that night, everything was set. They had tested the cash register system, run test credit cards on the machine, and checked the sound system for the music they would pipe in. The 5 women and Bailey had all practiced with every machine until it was second nature. "So dinner," Andrea said as they stood around the front desk. "The guys have that in hand," Sheila said. "Apparently they're arranging food and we're just supposed to show up on the roof with the kids in." She checked the clock. "Half an hour." "Perfect." Vanna put her hands on her lower back and stretched. She had helped for the past 2 hours, despite the fact that she had her own business and office to run. Who knew how many tiny details we would need for our businesses? "How's your client base doing?" Andrea asked. "Growing, slowly but surely. Ethan's trying to convince his brother to let me do some looking around for him, but Jared's still holding off. The offer stands for either of you. You'd be free of charge, and my pleasure." She looked at Andrea and Deirdre. Vanna looked at Bennett. "I'd offer for you too, but you already have your guy." Bennett blinked. "I'm just starting to see Nash. No one said anything about him being my future husband. I don't need another husband." "Of course you don't, but that doesn't mean he's not the right guy for you." Vanna didn't wait for a rebuttal. "In any case, I'd like to freshen up a bit before dinner, and Mina's running herd on all of the kids right now." "No, just the boys. The men took the girls up to the roof with them," Andrea said. "Already?" Bennett asked. "Yes. Some surprise in the works, apparently. They said for us not to show up early, though. I'm headed to the shower." "Good call." Bennett could stand to wash off the dirt and sweat. She followed the rest of them out, double-checking the doors and lights, and locking up the door to the back entrance after one last look back. They had done well. Everyone except for Caleb was waiting in the hall when Bennett emerged from her apartment just before 5:30. "Wow, are we all going as an entourage?" Nash slid his hand into hers, brought it to his mouth to brush her fingers over his lips. "You bet. Caleb just called. He's at Dequan's picking up dinner. He'll meet us at the main elevator." "Okay, that's going to be a tight squeeze." The elevator wasn't tiny, but even with the little ones, 16 people would be a lot of people at once. "We'll take a couple loads up to the 6th floor and then do a quick walk through Deirdre's place, so you all get to see our surprise at once. It'll be fine." They took the stairs down to the main floor, went back through the passage in Vanna's office to the main elevator that went all the way up to the roof, but didn't stop on the 2nd or 3rd floors. Half the group got in and headed up only a moment before Caleb joined them with several bulging bags of takeout. He was still dressed in his army uniform from work on base that day. "Hey, everyone. I hope you're hungry. I bought out the restaurant." "Perfect. I'm starved," Sheila said. They met the first group just outside the elevator. They walked through Deirdre's future home, which was all sheetrocked and the texture was drying on the walls. The crew had already started sheetrocking the 5th floor that afternoon. "We're getting so close," Andrea said. "Can you believe it?" "Right on schedule, which is even more amazing," Deirdre said. "That's what happens when you build delays into the schedule and pay the subs as soon as the work is done instead of making them go to the bank and wait for approval," Sheila said. "My room is going to be green," Kaylin said as she pointed it out. "Mine is going to be purple," Grace said. The other girls chimed in with their future room colors while Bobby focused on the bags of food, and the other 2 boys babbled things to their moms. Bennett smiled. This was her real family. Chaotic, eclectic, noisy, and fun. They walked up the last flight of stairs to the roof and into the bright sun. There on the edge of the cement, under an enormous shade sail that hadn't been there a couple of days earlier, were 2 wooden picnic tables. The tabletops rotate back to turn each one into 2 benches, so there will be somewhere comfortable to sit for watching fireworks or keeping an eye on the kids, Caleb said. "They're perfect." Sheila walked over and ran her hand along the top of one of the tables. "That's what we thought when Caleb showed us the listing yesterday." Ethan agreed. "We picked them up at a store that specializes in wood furniture in Piper. We also ordered one more since we're going to fill these 2 already and figured we might need another one if we have friends like Charlie and Peter, or Comfrey and Nick join us for a barbecue. Speaking of barbecues, we've been looking at a couple that would feed all of us, but thought maybe we should run it past you ladies first in case you have a preference. Nash opened a bin that sat next to the tables and pulled out paper plates, cups, napkins, and utensils. Caleb unpacked the bags of food, laying the containers out across the two tables that sat end to end. Ethan opened a cooler on the other end of the tables, pulling out a bottle of champagne and one of sparkling cider. We have plastic wine glasses to celebrate. You ladies have accomplished something amazing. We can't wait to see what you do next. He poured out bubbly to everyone, and they did several toasts before filling their plates with food. As she started on her broccoli beef, Bennett thought that nothing could ruin such a perfect evening.
Nash hated the idea of ruining Bennett's great mood, so he waited until dinner was over. They had played games with the kids and got them into bed, allowing her to enjoy the evening. But when the kids were all in bed and the adults were starting to gather in the common room, Nash stopped Bennett as she was leaving her place and walked her down to the end of the hall, away from anyone else's apartment. "This can't be good," Bennett said. "But that doesn't mean that it's bad. I was checking my Google alerts this afternoon and your name popped on Facebook." Bennett stiffened, as if bracing for the bad news. "Okay, what did Tiffany say?" "She was on the page for your graduating class, and someone had asked if anyone had heard anything about some guy. Tiffany commented, 'Speaking of people we haven't heard a word about in years, guess who I ran into last weekend?' She said she'd seen you at the festival and that you were starting a business with some other women." He wasn't going to tell her that people commented that they thought she had died on the streets. "Did she mention the town or store name?" "No, but it's possible someone might ask in the future. Someone asked if you had a kid. Apparently there was a rumor going around at your school that you were pregnant and you ran away with the father." His brow lifted in question. Bennett thought that through. "I'm not sure what to think about that. Like I said, this isn't necessarily bad news, just information that could go either way at this point. Thanks for letting me know. I'll keep an eye on the discussion." Bennett nodded. "Thanks for saving this until after the kids went to bed. I needed to blow off some stress with everyone tonight, and I couldn't have done it with this on my mind. But if you'd waited any longer to tell me, I wouldn't have been happy about it." "I figured. Are you ready to tell the others?" She considered for a moment. "No, there's no direct threat, and if we tell them part of it, they'll push to know pretty much everything, and I'm not ready to talk about it to everyone. We can wait a little longer, but Nash would feel a lot better about it if all of the adults knew the score so they could help protect Bennett and Grace." At least, she had considered for a moment before saying no. "I knew there was a but coming. But whatever more there is to the story, all we need to tell them is that you're concerned that your mom might come looking for you, that she was abusive, and you don't want her to even know that Grace exists, never mind see her. If they help protect you and her, you don't have to explain anything else. You all respect each other's right to privacy, so why would they push for more?" Nash could see her wavering, biting her bottom lip. He wanted to kiss it, but held off, letting her work through the idea on her own. The fact that she was deliberating so much told him how much she wanted to tell her sisters. "Okay," she finally said. "You're right, I'll tell them." He slid his hand into hers and led her back to the common room. He had noticed several of the sisters giving them curious looks as they passed through the halls, so he was glad Bennett was willing to give them some kind of explanation. "What's going on? You look pretty serious talking down the hall," Deirdre said when they entered the room. Everyone was there except for Caleb, and the sound of the door opening down the hall indicated that he was on his way. Nash led Bennett to two open chairs, and they slid in. "Just some updates we wanted to talk to you about." "What's up?" Caleb asked as he took the empty chair beside Mina. Bennett hesitated, and Nash wondered if she was second-guessing her decision to tell them. "I'm sure when we were at the festival you noticed that Bennett ran into someone she knew from growing up," he started when she didn't. "Yeah, funny how you can sometimes run into someone you know in a random place. You didn't look too thrilled to see her, Andrea said. Bennett pushed back her shoulder and took up the topic. You know I don't talk about life before James, or even James much, actually. I grew up in Maryland, near Baltimore. I thought you grew up in St. Louis, Sheila said. That's what I tell people. It's where I lived before I moved here. Anyway, my parents were mean alcoholics, so I lived with my sister. She died when I was 16, and I ran away because I was not going back there, so I bought a fake ID that said I was 18 and got out. That must have been awful. I can't imagine trying to run at that age with a baby. Vanna put her hand over Bennett's on the table. It was bad enough trying to figure things out as an adult. Bennett nodded. I kind of freaked out about seeing Tiffany, and I was glad that Grace wasn't around at the time. I don't want word to get back to my mother about me being here. Rumor has it that she's clean, but she doesn't know about Grace, and I don't want her to find out if she comes looking. You think she will? Deirdre asked. I don't know. It's possible. I would have said no way. My parents didn't care at all when I moved in with Nadine and Jax, but if she's really sober, it's possible she might wonder what happened to me and come looking. I hope not. So if anyone asks about you or seems too curious, just don't talk about Grace, or even you unless it directly relates to your work, Andrea said. That's about the size of it. I'll tell Bailey, Andrea said. Actually, that's a good policy regarding all of us. Bennett isn't the only one trying to keep the past in the past, Deirdre said. It was especially true of Deirdre, to the extent that they knew basically nothing about her before she moved into the women's shelter, except that she had moved around a lot. It was why Bennett and Deirdre were getting the top 2 apartments of the building. They were more secure and harder to access than the lower ones, albeit just barely. Agreed. You know we have your back, whatever you need. The others agreed, and Bennett wondered if they would still feel that way if they knew the whole truth. Anyone need to change the schedule for the next few days? Andrea asked when everyone appeared done with that subject. They had broken up the day into 3 shifts, so 2 of them would be in the store with Bailey at all times for the grand opening, though Nash imagined they would all be down there as much as possible when they didn't have the kid-watching shift. He and Ethan had kept their schedule clear of appointments just in case they were needed for a last-minute emergency, but he didn't expect that they would need any help. Still, it would be a kick to walk through the store tomorrow when there were customers browsing around. Bennett appeared calm and unruffled as they discussed final details for the next day, but her finger tapped against his knuckle as they held hands on his thigh. He wished there were some way he could protect her from her past, but no one was able to do that. He would have to stick to helping her build a brighter future instead.
Grace had awoken from nightmares twice that night, which meant that Bennett had woken as well. When she added her anxiety about the store opening, which kept her awake for quite a while after she went to bed, Bennett was definitely not at her best when Nash came to her door that morning as she made eggs for breakfast. "Hey, today's the day," he said brightly. "You got coffee from someone already, no fair." She glanced over at her pot, which was nearly done brewing. "Did you already eat breakfast too?" "No, I have not eaten. Is that an invitation?" "Sure, I can do more eggs when these are done. Toast would be good too." "Will there be cheese on those scrambled eggs?" he asked as he came around the counter. "You bet." She was thrown off balance when he took her arm, turning her into him and kissing her thoroughly. That would wake up a dead person, she thought as she sank into the kiss. She grabbed onto his sleeve with the hand that wasn't holding a spatula and shifted closer. "Mom, you're going to burn the eggs," Grace said when the kiss had lasted approximately forever. Bennett pulled back and blinked. Grace had still been lounging in bed when Nash had walked through the open door. "Right, eggs." She turned to the pan and stirred them, though she was still flustered from the kiss. She broke a few more into a bowl and mixed them while she waited for the ones in the pan to finish. Nash pulled the bread out of the cupboard without having to ask where it was and started the toast. "How many slices of toast do you want, Squirt?" "2. And my name isn't Squirt. Do you prefer Shrimp, Shorty, Minnie Bennett? If you aren't going to call me your Grace, you may call me your Majesty." Grace fought a smile. "I see. You don't like being referred to as variation of the word short, and you want more respect than anyone else around here. Of course, I am the princess after all. Of course, what was I thinking? Nash turned to Bennett. 2 slices for you too? That would be perfect. I also have some bacon I fried up a few days ago. I'll throw it back in the pan for a couple of minutes to warm up. Hash browns? He asked hopefully. Be happy with your toast. She sprinkled shredded cheese on the eggs and then put a lid on it to melt the cheese. Grace, set the table, will you? Grace hesitated to put down the book she had picked up, but after a couple of seconds replaced her bookmark and set the book aside. Okay. That was unusually easy, Bennett said. I want to play on the roof today, and you won't let me if I don't help out. You're so right. She would have to remember that threat. Don't forget the milk. I won't. The galley kitchen was small, and they bumped into each other several times, but Bennett had the impression that she only ran into Nash because he wanted her to. They worked well together, mixing, buttering, and discussing the day ahead. It was odd having a man working in the kitchen with her. Her cooking skills were severely limited, but neither her father nor James had wanted anything to do with the kitchen unless it entailed getting something out of the fridge, and even then they usually had her do it. She definitely wouldn't complain if Nash wanted to help more often. When breakfast was done and they had cleaned up, Bennett got ready for the day, frowning at the smudges of mascara that had been under her eyes and her messy curls. At least Nash had seen her at her worst and was still interested. He didn't make a single comment about her messy state or the worn tee and shorts she slept in. James would have totally made some passive-aggressive comment about how she could afford decent clothing now, and why hadn't she done something about her appearance as soon as she had gotten up. Feeling a lot better about her reflection in the mirror, Bennett took Grace downstairs to celebrate the doors opening with the whole family of women and children. "This is it, girls," Andrea said when they had all gathered. "I think we need to celebrate the doors opening with a booty shake," Bennett said. "What?" Vanna asked with a chuckle. "You know, when you accomplish something awesome, you do a booty shake in celebration. My sister Nadine and I always did, and since she's gone and you all are here, my other sisters, I want to celebrate with you and remember her." "That sounds perfect," Mina said. She started dancing around, giving a little extra shake with her booty as she danced. Bennett joined her, and soon everyone, even buttoned-up Vanna, was dancing around and shaking their booties. The kids thought it was a hoot and joined in. The song on the sound system ended and the adults came to a halt, though the kids danced on. "Okay, time to open the doors." Mina walked over, twisted the lock, and flipped the open sign. They all cheered as Bailey walked in. "Did I just see you all dancing in here?" Bailey asked. "We're booty shaking," Grace said. "In celebration of opening." Bailey did a little booty shake of her own. "In celebration of the new job." They grinned at each other for a moment before splitting up to their individual pursuits. "I have morning munchkin duty. You guys want to go to the roof?" Bennett asked, including Sheila in the look, since Sheila was on duty with her. "Yeah!" the girls shouted. Sheila nodded. Bobby, Parker, and Devon were still dancing and laughing in hilarity. "All right, everyone up the stairs." Bennett gestured to the stairwell at the front of the store and used her key card and passcode to open it. By the time they hit the roof, 6 flights of stairs had worked all of the dance out of the kids, and they collapsed dramatically on the grass. "We need the elevator to come up here," Chelsea said. "The elevator belongs to the workmen for now. Besides, you could stand to get your wiggles out." Bennett poked her in the ribs. Chelsea giggled and hid behind her mom. "Hey, don't hide behind me. I might just give you a poke as well," Sheila said. They let the kids run, bounce balls, hopscotch, and play for most of the morning, settling down for a short cartoon just before lunch. It was a good morning since they only had to break up arguments half a dozen times and kiss 2 owies. After lunch, Bennett and Sheila were tagged out by Mina and Deirdre and headed to the store. The store was busy. Not bustling like Walmart on December 24th, but there were quite a few customers checking out the merchandise, and a glance at her section proved that there had been a number of sales already. They both greeted customers and got busy. It was nearly an hour before Sheila was able to catch Bennett alone for a moment to whisper, That booty shake was powerful. Of course it was. It had 14 people spreading good luck. Why didn't we do that when we bought the building? Bennett paused for a moment before admitting, Mina and I did. I was just too self-conscious to invite you all to participate, especially with Vanna around. You know how intimidating she can be when you first meet her. Bennett didn't feel that way anymore, but that was only due to living in each other's pockets for the past 5 months. Guilty. Not so much anymore, though. Right? Bennett smiled at the dark-haired woman in her 60s who walked over with a basket filled with a lovely felted fashion scarf, 6 scented bars of soap, a pair of twisted iron candle holders, and 2 bracelets and a necklace. Looks like you found something special in every section except the photographs, Bennett said as she rang up the purchase. Oh, we made an appointment with Andrea for next week. We haven't had official portraits taken of the 2 of us in ages, have we, Carl? She asked a man who was walking up behind her with an iron cutout of a wolf howling at the moon. We have not. Add this to the purchase. Bennett grinned and rang it in with the rest. Apparently, their joint business venture was going to be a rousing success. 11. The first full week of running the store Hart made had gone great. Bennett locked up the store on Saturday night with Bailey and ran the sales report. If this kept up, they would totally be able to move Bailey to full-time instead of half-time. She would need to give it a few weeks to watch the trends to be sure. 2 more artisans had come on board, a stained glass artist and one who made jams and jellies. The stained glass artist, Hannah, was a former inhabitant of the women's shelter, though she had moved in after the other ladies had all moved out. A 3rd artisan had been in and asked about selling her specialty honey and beeswax products. Bennett couldn't be more thrilled. After locking up behind Bailey, Bennett headed through the secret door in Vanna's office and up to the 2nd floor. So, how were sales? Deirdre stuck her head out of her apartment to ask, almost the second Bennett stepped into the hall. Great, I'll crunch some numbers and we can look at trends. It's a little early yet to get too crazy about trends, but it doesn't hurt to start looking at them. We're probably getting more people in right now because it's new and shiny, Deirdre agreed. That's my concern too, but with the new products we could be adding in the next few weeks. I heard about the beekeeper. Crossing my fingers? Bennett turned into her own apartment, wondering if she had enough food in the cupboards to make something, or if she needed to make a run for fast food tonight. She stopped short just inside her apartment when she found Nash standing at her stove, cooking something. What are you doing? You've been working your guts out all week and feeding me most meals. You don't really love cooking, do you? Not at all. It's a necessary evil which I avoid at all costs, thus the many frozen pizzas and prepackaged meals. Which is why I went shopping. You were out of practically everything, and I'm cooking dinner. You? Cooking? Yes, my mom did teach me how. I just haven't pulled my pans and stuff out of storage since I moved off base. Where are your things? Bennett asked as she came around the half wall that enclosed the kitchen area. Houston. I went to school at Texas A&M with Ethan and left my stuff there, since I didn't have a reason to move it all somewhere else. If you're planning to stay in the area, you probably ought to think about moving your stuff here, Bennett suggested as she peeked into the pot. Chili. It smelled delicious. Did you make that from scratch, or did it come from a can? A bunch of cans. Black beans, kidneys, navy beans, spices, hamburger, tomato sauce, and other things. Whoa, my kitchen has only seen something that complex created when Mina was my roommate. Her chicken tikka masala is the best, he agreed. Without doubt, especially when it's paired with fresh naan. Do you need a hand with any of this? Nope. Go ahead and do your bookkeeping thing while I finish up here. Grace is swimming with Sheila and her kids, so she'll be ready to eat a horse by the time she gets back up here. The girl is a fish, a dolphin. Bennett sat at the table and opened her laptop, inserting the flash drive she'd used to download the sales reports. She sure does like swimming. I think she'd live in the pool if I let her. No doubt. Did you and your sister like to swim when you were kids? Sure, who doesn't? But nothing like Grace does. You might have to get her onto a swim team. Maybe. Bennett wondered if they would still be in the area in the fall. Maybe when she considered future locations to live in, she should look at cities with good swim programs. She didn't know if the interest would last, but it didn't hurt to think long term. Bennett added each day's sales reports and dumped the whole pile of data into a program that would break it down a half-dozen directions. Are you baking something? Cornbread, can't have chili without it. My hero. Bennett brought up the day-to-day sales numbers, shifted them to an hourly report, and then one by department. Mina was edging out everyone else in dollar sales, though that was considerably fewer items. Not surprising considering how much more valuable most of her items were. Wow, that's a lot of graphs. What are they all for? Nash asked. Bennett talked about the different sales details she had input into the database and how she could pull out the parts that she needed. It's way too early to make realistic projections, but it's nice to see proof that we're headed in the right direction. How did you learn to do all of this? I mean, you ran away when you were a teenager. I know the GED doesn't cover this kind of thing. I took some classes at the community college just before I met James. I thought accounting might be the right way to go, and a few classes would open up my job options. When I married James, I took a break from school and didn't go back. But when I started my business, it was great having a little accounting background. It's helped us in a dozen ways already. I'm sure it has. Luckily for me, Ethan has the business background, so I can just be an engineering geek and leave the books to him. We all have our strengths. Hi, Mom. Swimming was so fun. Parker loves his floaties. Grace walked in, wrapped in a towel with her hair still dripping. And I can swim all the way to the deep end and back so fast. Sheila was amazed. I'm sure she was. Satisfied with the look she had taken at everything, Bennett closed down her program and turned to her daughter. You're soaking wet. Have you been running through a rainstorm or something? Mom, you're such a dork. Grace went into the bathroom and closed the door. I guess she told me, Bennett said. I guess so. How long will she be in there? If she's actually showering, between 2 minutes and forever, I'll grab her pajamas. Grace was reasonably fast, taking less than 15 minutes, saying she was starving, which, considering she had been swimming for 2 hours, Bennett completely believed. They sat down to chili and cornbread with a little ice cream for dessert. As they lingered over their chocolate swirl, Grace asked Nash questions about his service in the Army. So you jumped out of planes and helicopters? Wasn't it scary? At first, but it's also really fun if you have the right equipment and training. It can be very dangerous if you aren't prepared with regulation equipment. She nodded. Did you ever shoot someone? Nash froze for a second, and Bennett tried to let him off the hook. Honey, that's not a nice thing to ask. Why not? It's an honest question, Grace said, as if that was the only thing that counted when you asked something so personal. It's okay. Nash hesitated as though searching for the right words. I served in a war zone. More than one. It was scary and sometimes it was dangerous. I don't like that I had to shoot people, but sometimes I did. I wish I hadn't needed to. Bennett felt her heart slow. He'd killed people. Sure, he said he wished it hadn't been necessary, but on more than one occasion, both James and her parents had said they wished they hadn't needed to hit her. That violence was inside Nash. Would it come out in other ways? She hadn't seen any, but no one believed James was abusive. That, and people had told her all the time that her parents were just the best ever. She remembered the words Nash had said nearly 2 weeks earlier, that he wouldn't ever hurt a woman. But when it came down to it, could he really know that? What if she made him mad? She hadn't seen him mad yet. She pushed the thought away. Nash was kind, thoughtful, and a good kisser. Like super hot in the kissing department. Not that being a good kisser had anything to do with anything else, but he would never be that guy. But a tiny niggling doubt wouldn't let her discount the possibility completely. Bennett adjusted the display of jams and jellies that had arrived that morning. The labeling was so cute, and she loved the pretty way they displayed. She had already purchased 1 container of elderberry jelly to try for herself. Mid-mornings tended to be quiet, so it was just her and Andrea in the store at the moment. Though Andrea was in her studio editing some photos she had taken that morning, 2 customers roamed around the room, and Bennett kept an eye on them as she shifted merchandise to fill empty spots, and made notes about what was selling the best so they could keep those items stocked. The bell dinged as another customer entered, and Bennett turned to greet the couple. It took only 2 seconds for her to recognize both of them. From high school. Crap, crap, crap. They weren't looking her way, so she whirled to head to the photography studio, planning to get Andrea to help them while she slid out of sight. Bennett, is that you? Crap. She had only managed a few steps. If they had just wandered into the shop by accident, they never would have guessed it was her, so they'd come looking for her. Bennett forced a smile and turned back to them. She feigned a look of confusion for several seconds before allowing recognition to show. Of course, Jamie and Jamie. Did you two actually get married? The couple had been an item throughout high school, so it wasn't all that shocking, but must confuse the heck out of everyone they knew. I go by my middle name now, Darren, Jamie said. It's just simpler for everyone we meet. We heard you were working here. We could hardly believe it when Tiffany said she'd run into you at the festival. It's a small world, isn't it? Are you just visiting? Oh, no. We live in Kansas City now. I'm in finance, and I have a client I needed to visit in Leavenworth, so Jamie came with me. We were hoping to find you here. How nice. And what are you doing these days? Bennett asked the woman, who had been her nemesis for most of her school years. Jamie smiled as if only nanoseconds from a laugh. I'm at UMKC, finishing up my master's degree in nursing. What brought you out here? It's a long way from Baltimore. Not nearly long enough, apparently. This and that. A job transfer or two, and now I'm involved in this business which I'm running with friends. Tiffany said you make yarn, like you card your own wool and everything. That's so sweet, Jamie said. Do you churn your own butter too? Bennett managed to keep a pleasant smile in place, though she wanted to stomp on the woman's toes. Churning butter is way outside my wheelhouse. There's a growing market for hand-spun and dyed woolen yarns. I sell most of mine online, but since we opened this location, I'm getting more and more interest from people in the city who want a high-quality product. Though she knew they wouldn't be the least impressed, Bennett gestured them over to the area where she had set out her yarns, a few bats of dyed wool, and her hand-felted wearables. Yarn is the biggest part of my business, but I also do quite well with my scarves. This one would definitely suit you. She picked one she had made out of deep blue and white wool. She was especially proud of the delicate piece, strong and classic. It's one of a kind and light enough to wear from fall to spring, though it would be a little warm for summers here. She draped it over Jamie's shoulder and turned the woman to look in the mirror. Jamie ran her hand along the length of the scarf. It's so soft and really lovely. You made this? Surprise and appreciation tinged her voice. Yes, I did. You should see the collection of not quite perfect scarves I had to go through before I was able to create something like this. The peach one would also suit you. She lifted the end of the other scarf to show off the reddish dots that looked like a field of flowers from a distance. That's also lovely, Jamie cooed. How did you get into this? A little help from a local friend. While you're here, you should check out Deirdre's handcrafted soaps and the new jams and jellies I put out only this morning. Also, Mina is an amazing jeweler. It's all handcrafted. We'll do that. Jamie took both of the scarves Bennett had pointed out, as well as a third, and picked up several pieces of jewelry and a dozen soaps before the two of them came to check out. Trying not to look smug that the woman had bought 3 of the scarves she'd made after her crack about carding wool, Bennett started folding them. Looks like you found a few things that you like. I hope you come back soon, or check out our website. I'll definitely do that. Everyone wondered what happened to you when you ran away like that, Jamie said. I heard you were pregnant and ran off with the father. Bennett forced a laugh, though her words brought back the uneasiness that had been burning low in her chest. You can't believe every rumor you hear. She seriously doubted her disappearance made more than the tiniest ripple in her high school. She hadn't been at all popular, and the kids in the math club had hardly been high on the social scale. How long have you been in the Kansas City area? She kept them talking about themselves as much as possible and waved them out the door. Jamie said she couldn't wait to bring back several of her friends. Looking forward to it. Bennett didn't count on them coming back. She also didn't trust that word wouldn't get back to her family. Would she ever be able to feel safe again? 12. One of the first things Bennett had done when she had arrived in Kansas City was to put out feelers about who to go to for fake IDs and paperwork. When the women had won the lotto, the others had helped protect her from the publicity by claiming the ticket without her, and then funneling all of the money into a joint trust, in which she then became an equal owner. They had each taken a small payout to ease the way while they dealt with legal fees, buying the building and planning for the future. Since most of the others had higher equipment costs to get their businesses into full productivity, Bennett had laid aside a nice sum in case she had to start over again. Bennett's future plans had included collecting a second set of documents with fake names and information in case all of this came back on her. After she put Grace to bed and kissed Nash goodnight that evening, Bennett pulled up her computer, logged into a Tor browser, and started researching locations to live in, maybe the West Coast. If she picked a small town in Oregon, not too far from the ocean but far enough from a big city, she might be able to blend into the background. Be anonymous. She already had a burner phone stashed with her cash in a lockbox under her bed. It wouldn't last forever, but Deirdre would help her get away if she needed to. And they would find a way to get her more of their winnings eventually. As she looked at future locations, she considered Grace's love of swimming, her own need for space and privacy, and looked at weather patterns and access. Over the next week, Bennett compiled a list of cities where she would be interested in living and narrowed it down to 3. She printed driving directions and details she might need and locked them in the box with her cash. She double-checked the fake IDs, social security cards, and birth certificates she would need to be sure they looked as good as she remembered. Then she pulled out a bag and started packing a few essentials, just in case they had to run at a moment's notice. Acting perfectly normal with the others sometimes taxed her acting ability, especially with Nash, who was slowly chipping away at her protective wall. If there was anything that her escape from James had taught her, it was that sometimes you had to take your chance when it appeared, so you had to be prepared for the opening. Getting closer to Nash now when she might have to leave at a moment's notice was making the preparations even harder. Her phone dinged as she stashed 2 pairs of socks for Grace in the bag. Sheila and Ethan said they're willing to take Grace tomorrow night. How about a real date? Feeling better now that she was fully prepared, and hoping none of her preparations would be needed, Bennett let herself relax. It probably wasn't smart, but she couldn't say no. Sure, that sounds perfect. What should I wear? I guess clothes are required in public, so wear some, but it won't be formal or anything. Very funny. I know, I'm a hoot. Sweet dreams. You too. Of course, I always dream of you. That made Bennett smile, even though it was a line anyone could see from 1,000 paces. Nash had spent most of his free time in the evenings with her and Grace since she had told him more about her past, but they hadn't managed a real date with just the 2 of them, and trying to really get to know each other with a little girl in the mix was not ideal. Excitement trickled through Bennett's system. A date with Nash? Not in her apartment, on the roof, or with her daughter around. This could be fun.
Nash was strangely nervous as he prepared for his date with Bennett. They had been spending all kinds of time together for the past couple of weeks, and kissing her had become his latest obsession. He wished he could go on for hours. But a real date, this was something new. Other than not wanting to go somewhere fancy, which wouldn't suit either of them very well, he hadn't the slightest clue what to do with her at first. It wasn't like he was new to dating. It just seemed like every restaurant, every activity seemed like it wasn't good enough. Nash wanted to impress her, make her as crazy about him as he was about her, especially when he felt her sliding slowly away with every passing day. "You're putting way too much pressure on yourself," Ethan said when Nash was still looking up ideas on his lunch break. "I know, I just want it to be fun and a chance to talk, and not too much pressure." "Then pick something fun. Take her indoor skydiving or out on go-karts or to Worlds of Fun." "I only have a few hours." "Okay, then hold worlds of fun for another time. Bennett likes excitement. It doesn't have to be huge, just something new and different, and then grab burgers and eat them in the park or something where you won't have distractions. It's not like this is a marriage proposal or anything, right? Of course not. No way was she ready to go there. And even though he knew she was the one for him, he wasn't going to rush them into anything. Her slow slide away from him would turn into a jackrabbit run if he pushed her. Then don't sweat it. Go have fun. Let her get away and take a break for a while. Right. No need to go crazy, but he couldn't help himself. When Nash showed up at Bennett's door at 6 o'clock that night, he had his plans in place. Bennett had left her curls down, softening her face and bringing out the blue in her eyes. She'd chosen a soft blue tee that read, "To know me is to love me. To love me is to buy me yarn." Her jeans hugged her in all the right ways and were finished with a beat-up pair of not-so-white sneakers. She looked adorable and ready for anything, just the way he wanted her. "Is this okay? I can change," she said when all he could do was stare. "Oh no, this is perfect. Seriously, you look amazing." "I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans." "And you look amazing. Just tell me you're planning to wear something slinky to one of the weddings this fall. I may have a heart attack, but I'll die happy." Bennett stopped looking so self-conscious and smiled. "You do have plenty of charm when you choose to use it." "I've been using it ever since we met. You were just too stubborn to notice." He took her hand and led her toward the stairs. "I noticed. I just didn't admit it. I always suspected that." They came out on the main floor a moment later and took the back way through Vanna's office to the garage. "It seems like Vanna is getting a lot more business than she used to have," Nash said. "She's working on it. She's taking a trip to St. Louis to meet with some people there who are interested in engaging her services. She's very selective, though. Only the best and richest, not necessarily the richest. Sometimes both parties have engaged her, and other times she meets a perfect match for a client when she's involved in other things, so only the one pays her. And sometimes clients wait for quite a while before she finds a good match for them. She's very focused on long-term results." They passed through the pool area where Vanna and Corinda were playing in the water. "Hi, where are you off to?" Vanna asked. "Dinner and fun." Nash gave her a quick wave before opening the door to the garage and led Bennett to his silver Ford Fusion. "You know, I expected you to have an Explorer or something big and macho," Bennett said as he held the passenger door for her. "I'm big and macho enough that it doesn't matter what I drive." True enough. Some of the tightness in his chest loosened at her smile and acknowledgement. They were getting along fine. They were both ready for a casual, fun evening. There was no need to put all of this pressure on it just because it was the first real date they'd ever had. He slid into his seat, and as they waited for the garage door to open, Bennett asked, "So why this car and not a truck or an SUV?" "I really don't need anything that big or powerful. I've been saving for a car since I sold my old beater before we deployed, and it didn't make sense to take on a big car payment when Ethan and I were about to start a new business. I know we'll succeed, but I don't have a huge portfolio to fall back on if things take longer to ramp up than we expect. Besides, I like how this handles. Why are you still driving your old sedan instead of buying something new? You're rolling in it. It runs just fine. I'll replace it next year. But none of us wanted to buy anything expensive before we got everything settled with the building costs. I know some people think we're being too cautious, but way more money went to taxes than one might think, and renovating a building this size is eating a huge hole into our bank account. Also, we had some concern about being targeted at first. We got a lot of dirty looks from a few people in our neighborhood. I heard your nest egg is doing well. Well enough for now. Yes, we needed to set money aside for ongoing maintenance and taxes and utilities, because our new businesses aren't likely to make enough money to finance our new lifestyles alone. We don't want to end up like so many people who get major cash infusions and go bankrupt in a couple of years. We're all researching our dream cars so we can make the right choices for us when the time comes. I think I'll get an SUV. Making multiple trips to haul wool home is a pain. There you go. You can have the macho car in our relationship. He was pleased when that brought a grin to her face. Works for me. Where are we going anyway? Bennett asked as he signaled that he was entering the freeway. Wait and see. They ended up at a go-kart track. The track was busy, and they had to wait in line for several rounds of people to have their turns. When they came up, Bennett slid into her cart and hunkered down. A little wager? As long as it's friendly, Nash said from the cart next to hers. If I win, you make dinner Friday night. Deal. If I win, you make lasagna for dinner Friday night. Me? Lasagna? Are you sure you'd want to eat it? I'll be happy to supervise and maybe even assist. Okay, deal. They waited until the other couple got up ahead of them enough and then took off. Nash managed to inch out ahead to begin with, handling the machine with ease as he accelerated through the first turn. He glanced to the left as the air blew Bennett's curls and pulled a hoot of laughter out of her. He doubled down at the straightaway and added a few more inches to his lead. I'm going to get you, Bennett called. You wish. She managed to inch up slightly on the next curve, but Nash pushed his advantage again almost immediately. He'd forgotten the thrill, the rush of the carts, the pure joy in the moment, and having Bennett there to compete with made everything even better. They stayed neck and neck all the way around the track until he cleared the finish line at least 6 inches ahead of her. They returned the carts to the beginning and climbed out. She was still laughing. Man, I haven't done that in years. Want another round? He asked. You bet. She beat him on round 2, but he won by nearly a length on the 3rd round. That's it, he said as they walked away from the track, hand in hand. I officially won that lasagna. Then I think I need a loser's prize as consolation. You need a dust catcher from the gift shop to remember your defeat? That's not what I had in mind. Nash turned to her when she stopped in the parking lot. What? Bennett touched his waist and then slowly ran her palms up the length of his chest, stepping closer as she wrapped her arms around his neck and popped up on her toes. He met the kiss with the same enthusiasm they'd shared on the track. He filled his hands with her, shaping her waist, sliding up her back, tangling with her silky curls while the kiss grew. They tasted, touched, and lingered. One of his hands slid down to take in the perfection of her butt, and she pushed closer, tipping her head to take more in the kiss. Hey, get a room, some joker said. Nash realized they were in public and were definitely pushing the bounds of propriety. His hands returned to her waist, and he let himself savor a few more seconds of her mouth before they parted. He cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. Maybe we need a go-kart track on the roof. Bennett just laughed and took his hand, leading him back to the car. They got burgers and shakes and headed to a park to eat them. You dip fries in your shake, Nash said with a fake shiver. It's so good, sweet and salty. Bennett did it again as if making a statement. You're weird, but I already knew that. You like my weirdness. Mostly. Tell me something about you that I don't know yet. Bennett seemed to consider the request. You already know so many of my secrets. But there are lots of maybe not-so-secret things that I don't know yet. Tell me one. She considered for a moment. Okay, I was president of the math club in high school. I was a total math geek. Calculus and everything. I actually took a calculus class in college, but it's not my cup of tea. I prefer accounting and long division, even physics. Whoa, I had no idea you were such a nerd. I just thought you were good with money. Your turn. What don't I know about you? Nash thought of all of the things he could tell her, but decided to give her something substantial. She had trusted him with so much. After my mom died, I tracked down my birth father. A mistake that had only worsened his abandonment issues, but he hadn't been able to stop himself. The guy who wasn't around and almost never paid child support? That was him. Mom should have gone after him in court for it, but she didn't like conflict, so she let it go unless we were desperate. So what happened? What was the deal with him anyway? He owns 3 car lots, has plenty of money, a huge house. When I came to him begging not to be put in foster care, he turned me away. He'd never formally acknowledged me as his son, unless you count the 4 or 5 payments my mom wheedled out of him when things were extra rough, and he had no intention of doing so. I only needed somewhere to land for 6 months, but he was afraid of everything coming out and marring his name. He was happily married to a woman who had given him the cash infusion to buy the car lots. He was a public figure after all. He tried making all kinds of excuses, but what it boiled down to was that he didn't want anything to do with me. Bennett's hand covered his on the table. That stinks on so many levels. On top of losing your mom, to have him treat you so badly must have been awful. Oddly comforted, Nash turned his hand over to cup hers. No more awful than being on your own and starting over after losing your sister and brother-in-law, or being a very young single mom. Very likely less awful. I had hoped he would step up for a change, but I didn't count on it, so my disappointment was minimized. Still, I'm glad you were able to meet Ethan so soon after that and find some family in him. I'm glad too, and even more that you ladies are starting to pull me into your family. It's nice to feel like I belong to people who care about each other. He slid an arm around her waist, tucking her a little closer to his side. It's the first time I've felt like I belonged anywhere too, not since Nadine died. Even then, I felt a little like an outsider in their house. Not because they didn't accept or want me there, but because they were this unit, and I was not central to it like the three of them were. It's taken me a long time to feel that way now. I'd hate to leave it if there's too much interest in Grace. The thread of contentment he had felt evaporated. So don't. Stay and fight for what you have. She's your daughter. What can anyone do to you? You don't understand. She pulled away, adding the space back between them. You're right. I don't understand. How can I when you won't tell me what you're really worried about? Bennett's eye darkened, turned fierce. No one can know, Nash. No one. I'm trying to be patient, to let you come to trust me in your own time. But you aren't making it easy when you say things like that. Did you do something that could land you in jail or something? Her face closed off and she focused on her food. She believed she could go to jail. How could she have done anything bad enough that she would still be afraid of it now? Would she ever trust him enough to share her fears?
13. Friday night. Bennett arrived at the store in time to lock up, pull the final reports for the week, and restock some of her yarns. It looked like she needed to focus on green yarn next, and she made a mental note to start on that when she finished the weekly reports and prepared the deposit. I had someone request cotton candy soap, Deirdre said as she swept the floor with a long rag mop. Fun? Any special reason? Or do they just like how it smells? They're doing a girls' weekend out with a bunch of friends next month. Worlds of fun, a play, shopping. They want to put together little grab bags with lip balm, lotion, soaps, and other fun items. I told her I'd get in touch with Comfrey and see if we could put together a set they'd like. How long will it take you to get the scent here? Will you do melt and pour? There's enough time for the goat's milk soap, and I got in the scent just this week, so I'll pour it tomorrow. I think it'll sell just fine even if they don't decide to go for it after all. I'm nearly out of the honey oat soap you made. I have a new one that's nearly cured that you'll love. I'll bring a bar over when it's ready. Bennett was dumping the trash when there was a knock at the front door. She ignored the noise and checked the garbage in Andrea's studio. Deirdre was still up front. Hey, Bennett, the woman at the door is asking for you, Deirdre said. Bennett grabbed a new trash liner and headed up front, coming to an abrupt halt when she saw the woman standing outside the glass door. You know each other? Deirdre asked when she saw Bennett's surprise. Yeah, she gave birth to me, so do you want me to let her in or not? Bennett considered the options and shook her head. She dreaded speaking with her mom, but it might be the only way to get rid of her. No, I'll go out on the sidewalk and talk to her. Lock up behind me, will you? And take the cash bag upstairs. I'll do the deposit when I get rid of her. Who is she? My mother. Deirdre said nothing else as she opened the door to let Bennett out and took the trash bag Bennett had forgotten she was still carrying. Right, thanks. Sure. Bennett stopped just outside the door and was glad when Deirdre locked up behind her. Yeah, the store was open to the public during business hours, but Bennett didn't want her mom going anywhere near the rest of her family. Hi, Bennett. Melanie Martin looked older than Bennett remembered and had aged more than the 9.5 years that had passed. Her hair was mostly gray, her skin sallow and hung on her bones. Hi. She wouldn't call the woman Mom, had stopped using that name for her before she'd ever moved to Nadine's. The title deserved a better person to embody it than Melanie had proved to be. What are you doing here? I thought you still worked in Baltimore. I do, but I wanted to see you. I heard you were here. I see the town grapevine is still up and running. Well enough. Tiffany's brother-in-law works with me. He thought I'd want to know that my daughter was still alive. Right. Why did you come here? Did your post office close? I wasn't the best parent. Bennett snorted at the understatement. Okay, I was an awful parent. I've changed, though. I've been clean for over a year, and your dad died. I heard about him from Tiffany. Looked it up. Lucky he was the only one killed in that accident. Good riddance. She may think it, but she wouldn't say it aloud. As terrible as they were together, Melanie had always cared for her husband. That was a wake-up call for me. I realized I'd lost everything and everyone. Nadine and Josie, your father, you. I started searching for you, but you were hard to track. That was the idea. Now she would have to do it all again. You always were resourceful. Thanks. Now, if you don't mind, I have a business to run. And a kid to feed. Melanie touched Bennett's arm. I took a leave of absence from work. I want to spend some time with you. Now that I'm clean and you're an adult, I hoped maybe we could share a meal. Reconnect. I think you did enough connecting with me when I was living at home. Your fist is great at connecting. Bennett turned to the right to walk away, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to shake off her mother. She probably didn't realize that Bennett lived here, so it was possible Bennett could double back when she was sure her mom was gone. I want to make amends. Because it's one of your steps in AA. Guess what? I don't want amends. I just want to be left alone. I've created a great new life here, and I don't want anything to do with you or any other part of my past. Bennett stopped in front of the community garden. I'm glad you're doing better and that you've got a good job and all that. It's good that you've done something better with your life, but I don't want any part of it. Melanie's face crumpled. But I'm applying for jobs here. You're all that I have left. Bennett closed her eyes and willed back the tears of sadness and frustration. She would have to leave. For real. Don't. If you move here, you'll force me to pick up and leave again. I finally made a life for myself here, and I want to leave everything that came before this firmly in the past. Bennett stared her mom in the eyes, willing her to accept it. You hate me that much? Melanie's voice had turned thready. You'd actually leave if I try to have a relationship with you? You beat me, pretty much every day for years. You told me I was useless, and when I moved in with Nadine, you barely even noticed I was gone unless you were calling to scream at me for not being there to clean the house. Mostly you were glad to have me out of your way. Melanie looked at her hands, which were twisted up together. I was awful, and I was glad that you moved to Nadine's. I realized that you were better off there, safer there. I didn't blame you when you ran away, even though I worried about you all the time. I've had 9 years of worrying about you, Bennett. Bennett returned to walking. Right, I'm sure I was your biggest worry in the seconds you spent not drunk and angry every day. Apparently, Melanie was done with being the verbal punching bag because her words had more force than anything yet that conversation. I'm your mother. Of course I worried about you. And I lost Nadine too, you know. How can you think I didn't mourn her death, her and Jax and Josie? You weren't the only one who lost people who were important to you that day. Though the idea of facing this woman terrified her, Bennett whirled to look her in the eye, the urge to protect her daughter stronger than her fear. You were drunk at their funeral. You made a mockery of the whole thing. I was a wreck. No parent should outlive their kid. I know I was out of control, but being drunk was the only way I thought I could cope. You coped your way, for sure. Bennett's anxiety grew with every step. Melanie wasn't going to leave her alone. How could she get back to Grace if her mom followed her everywhere? Can't you just listen to me for a few minutes? Melanie asked. I've been speaking to you for a few minutes already. The fact is, I don't care what you have to say. There's no excuse for what you did to me and Nadine. I don't want excuses or apologies. You can't make it better. What you can do is go away. No matter how mean she had been to Nash, Bennett had never been as flat-out unkind as she was being to Melanie now. The sorrow in the woman's eyes told her how much the unkind words hurt. Instead of being triumphant at finally getting some justice and giving back her own, Bennett felt pain. She might not want her mother in her life, but getting some closure would have been nice. And maybe, just maybe, it would have been possible under other circumstances, but there was no way she could risk losing Grace. No way. Melanie's face fell. I know I deserve your anger, but I hope you might change your mind. I'm here at the DoubleTree on the edge of town until Tuesday. Okay. Melanie turned and walked to a little red hatchback that was parked in front of the store. Bennett watched her until she got inside and drove out of sight. Then she headed for her apartment, sure that her mother wouldn't follow. Bennett waffled that night. Would her mom leave? Did she have to go, or would this be the end of it? She couldn't decide what to do, but she kept the visit to herself as she finished the reports and made the business deposit. Sales were holding steady, and she pulled out some chips and salsa that she'd been hiding to share with the others after dinner. She needed all of her sisters to be there while she told them about her mom's visit. What's this all for? Andrea asked when Bennett set out the snacks after the kids had gone to bed. Week 3 and our sales are still going strong. That's a reason to celebrate. I'm really happy with the overall numbers and can't wait to add in the new craftsman. She set down the mild salsa by Sheila and Vanna and a jar of super spicy for her, Andrea and Mina. Where are the guys? They ran to the gym. All this sedentary desk work has been rough on them, Sheila said with a chuckle. More power to them. I think I get enough exercise chasing Devin around, Mina said. The fact that she ate more vegetables than meats or carbs probably helped her maintain her thin frame, Bennett thought. Construction report? Andrea asked Deirdre. I just took a walk through the 4th floor. Painting's done. They move to the 5th floor next week, and the cabinet guys will arrive to start installing your kitchens. Oh man, I have to go check that out. How does it look? Mina asked. Great. The terracotta looks amazing in the living room. Are you still planning on doing the gold leaf? Definitely. As soon as we have a break between subs in there, I'll carve out a little time to work with my stencils. The sketches Mina had done of her future apartment were perfectly her. Minimalist comfort with a taste of India sprinkled in the mix. Other than picking out paint colors, Bennett still wasn't sure what to do about her own decorating. She hadn't even started looking at furniture, and after talking to her mother, she was glad she hadn't taken that step yet. There was no point in buying furniture she wouldn't be able to take with her if she had to leave in a hurry. Sheila's phone beeped and she pulled it out to read the message. Jen asked if Chelsea and Grace can hang out with them tomorrow. Apparently, Trina has been so bored since school got out. Bennett's phone dinged and she saw she had the same message from Jen. Sounds good. I have a ton of wool to wash and card. You want me to tell her yes and get the details? Sounds good. Bennett shot her a message and soon they had times all worked out. That's actually a relief. I wanted to get Grace out of the way for a few days. I had a visit from my mother today. Everyone's eyes fastened on her. Wait, really? When was this? Andrea asked. Bennett explained everything, grateful to get it off her chest. If she really leaves town on Tuesday and I don't see her again, then I think we'll be okay, but that only works if she doesn't see Grace or decide to try again. She came an awfully long way to give up after only one try, Deirdre said. I know. That's one of the things that's bothering me. Why would she just leave because I told her to? She's never done it before. I already pulled an image from the cameras, like I was just waiting for your say-so before sending it out, Deirdre said. Bennett pushed back her blonde curls and hoped they hadn't gone all frizzy on her. And there's another reason to hole up in my studio and work with wool all day tomorrow. With any luck, she'll really go away and we can stay here. So, what's the real deal? Vanna asked. You wouldn't be talking about leaving if it was just what you told us. We could easily help you keep Grace away from your mom. Some secrets are too important to share, even with people I love as much as I do all of you. Bennett ached to tell them the truth, the whole truth, but even though her heart said she could trust them, her head said no way, no how. "There's no problem we can't help each other out of," Sheila said. "That goes to show that even you can be wrong from time to time, though I've never thought that was true before." Bennett squeezed Sheila's hand. "Anyway, I thought you should know what's going on." No one seemed to like the idea that she might leave them, especially herself. But some things couldn't be changed. Bennett sang along with the radio as she laid out the last of the day's wool on her modified drying screen. She had washed 2 large bags of wool and set it on screens to dry, then took a previous batch and used her roller carding machine to turn it into a nice batting. After a dip in her dye vat, which was set up on the kitchen counter in her studio, that batch was now ready to spin into yarn. Or it would be when it was fully dried. The Robin's Egg Blue made Bennett smile as the song switched from Avril Lavigne to Linkin Park. Grace opened the door and rushed in. "Mom, Sheila invited Trina and her mom to swim downstairs. It was hot in the garden. Can I swim too?" She was flushed and grinning. "You were at the garden? What is she growing this year?" Bennett had seen the other woman tending a plot in the community garden next door several times since spring. Carrots and tomatoes and cucumbers. At home they have lettuce and spinach growing in the windows. Yum! And of course you can swim with them. Where are Trina and her mom? "In the hall, 'cause she wanted to talk to you. I'm going to get my suit." Grace dashed back out the door. Sighing at her green-stained hands, Bennett scrubbed them the best she could and headed for the hall, where Jen was talking to Sheila. "Are you getting in with the girls?" Bennett asked. "No, I'm just going to watch. Frankly, it'll be a relief to put my feet up and relax." Grace said you've been hard at work on your garden plot. "Yeah, my first tomatoes will be ready to harvest in a day or 2, Jen said. "That's always exciting," Bennett said. "We had some really early producing ones but only because we bought big plants to get a jump on it." Grace said you were down in the community garden. "Yeah, I'm not making nearly as many mistakes this year as last year so far. It takes practice." "It does. I wanted to talk to you about something else, though." Jen glanced down the hall each direction. "I saw a woman at the garden looking at Grace, like studying her. It was weird, which is why I brought the girls right home." Bennett looked at Sheila, who looked right back. Thin, pale, with brown hair that's going gray, about this long. Bennett gestured to her shoulder as she described her mother in as casual of a voice as possible. "Yeah, what's going on?" Jen looked at them both more worried than before. Sheila pulled out her phone and flipped to the picture of Melanie that Deirdre had sent earlier, and Jen nodded. "That's her," Bennett shrugged. "Everything's fine, thanks for letting me know." "What's going on?" "Just a little piece of my past coming back to bite me. Don't worry, she's harmless." Harmless as a lion. Thankfully, Jen seemed to accept that, and she was immediately distracted by Chelsea and Trina streaking out of Sheila's apartment. "Mom, we're ready," Chelsea said eagerly. "Wait for me." Grace's voice drifted from the next apartment over, and a moment later she appeared in her suit with a towel draped over her arm. "We weren't going to leave without you," Jen said. "Let me take you down and get you settled," Sheila said. "Then I'll come back for my own suit and some snacks." "Yes," Chelsea did a fist pump at the idea of snacks. Sheila muttered to Bennett, "Wait until she learns I'm only talking mini pretzels, vegetables, and dip." Bennett chuckled because she knew it was expected. She hadn't even thought about what would happen if Grace was seen out in public with someone else. Melanie would pick that time to be hanging out in the neighborhood. Was she still there? "Hey, instead of going out and around, how about if we go down through the store?" she suggested to Sheila. Nodding her understanding, Sheila redirected everyone to the stairwell at the end of the building. Bennett wasn't needed to help guide anyone, but she went anyway. She couldn't force her brain to stop traveling down the road it had been following. If Melanie had been staring at the girls, that meant she recognized Grace. She did look so much like Nadine, with a few hints of Jack's mixed in. Despite the years, Bennett had worried this would happen. Why did trouble always have to come to her doorstep? When they stepped from the stairwell into the store, Bennett studied the room, relieved not to see her mother. When they were halfway through, though, Melanie stepped out from behind a display and stared at Grace as she pranced by, completely oblivious as she spoke with her friends. Bennett stayed behind to distract Melanie so she wouldn't follow them. "What are you doing here?" "Still watching the procession," Melanie answered. "She has to be your daughter. The second I saw her, I thought of you and Nadine. She looks so much like you." Her gaze returned to Bennett. "You must have been pregnant when you left. She's what, 8, maybe 9? No way was Bennett going to answer that. "I thought you said you'd leave me alone." "I just hoped to catch sight of you, living your normal life, since I was in town for a few more days anyway. I keep hoping I can find a way to convince you to give me a chance. And look, there's my granddaughter." The knot in Bennett's stomach knotted and tangled like soapy wool felting into an impossible-to-separate mass. "You will have nothing to do with her." "Don't I have some rights as a grandparent?" "No, you don't. Just go home." Grace called out from the back door. "Mom, are you coming?" Bennett turned to see that megawatt smile that screamed Jax. "A little later. Go on in for now." "Okay." The door shut behind them. Click. Safe. Bennett looked back at Melanie and saw the recognition on her face. Oh crap, not safe at all. That's Josie. No punch had winded Bennett more, but she struggled to pretend she wasn't thrown. "You're crazy. Josie died in the boat accident, remember?" No one found her. "She was a tiny baby. Plenty of things in the ocean could eat an infant whole." "That's her, and you'll never convince me otherwise, not without proof." "You're wrong. Get out of my store. Now." The door to the stairwell opened, and both Nash and Ethan emerged, looked around, and then beelined toward them. Relief shot through Bennett even as Melanie refused. "Not without seeing her, talking to her. You've kept her from me, stolen her from me for all this time. Don't you think I suffered at the loss of my grandbaby?" "Ma'am, we need you to leave now," Ethan said in a calm, authoritative voice. "No way." She whirled around and looked up at the two well-muscled men and took a step back. "Go away," Bennett said. "My daughter is never going to be part of your life, and that's your own fault. She doesn't deserve to be abused like you did to me." Melanie flinched at the stark honesty. "I've changed." "I'm glad to hear it, but it doesn't change what I want, or what I don't." Melanie looked at the mountainous men who flanked her. "This isn't over." She turned on her heel and left the store. Bennett scanned the room and was glad only one customer seemed to have noticed something was going on, and they were keeping their distance. Since they had kept their voices low, it was possible that it had all stayed private. Bailey came out of the back room with a box and handed it to the customer. She smiled when she saw Bennett. She must not have seen Melanie, since Deirdre had sent her Melanie's picture along with everyone else's. "Thanks. How did you know?" Bennett asked the men. "Sheila called from the pool area," Ethan said as he moved toward the door to the back. "Are you okay?" Nash asked, linking their fingers together. "Sure, I'm fine. Just shaken." She led him toward the stairwell door again, her mind racing about what came next. Once she had keyed through the door and it shut behind them, Nash pulled her into his arms. "You must be freaked. What do you need from me?" Bennett buried her face in his chest, soaking up his support, knowing it would probably be the last. "Just this, right here." After that, what she would need was to be active, to burn off the nerves and adrenaline enough to process what to do next, to be absolutely sure that she was making the right next step. Nash needed to feel needed, though. She knew it would be hard for him when she left. He'd made no bones about the fact that he cared for her, and his life had been littered with people who left him. But a life on the run wasn't for him. Stability and community, that was what he needed, and it would be much harder to hide in plain sight with him around. He walked her to the second floor, but when he moved to go with her, she stopped him. "I need to work off some of this adrenaline and think, and if you go with me, I'm going to have other ideas." "Oh, really? That sounds intriguing." She leaned in and kissed him. Thoroughly. "Go back to work. I'll be fine. Thanks again for your help with her." "I didn't do much. It was exactly what I needed." Bennett squeezed his hand one more time before letting go, heading for her apartment. 14. When she reached the second floor, Bennett found Deirdre waiting for her. The redhead pulled Bennett into her apartment and shut the door. "I watched you talking to her on the cameras. Are you okay? You look very upset." "I am, but I'll be okay." If she said it enough, maybe she would convince herself. Maybe her mom would stay away and return to Baltimore. Maybe, if she was lucky, she would be able to put this all behind her. But luck had never been on her side. Deirdre studied Bennett's face. "You're going to leave us, aren't you? What's the secret, Bennett? What does she have on you that has you so scared?" Bennett shook her head. "I can't talk about it. You have secrets of your own. Do you want me pushing you to share?" Deirdre pursed her lips. "My secrets aren't on our doorstep." "That's what I thought. Just let it go." "I'd be happy to, if it wouldn't mean losing you. You're part of our family." "I know. Being with all of you is the best thing that ever happened to me, and the money has nothing to do with it, even though it's nice. I can't be here if she is. And she wants to move here. She just found something out, something that's going to keep her here, or coming back. No way can I stay." "Where will you go?" Deirdre asked. "I have some ideas. I haven't decided. I don't know if I'll leave. Not yet." That was just barely short of a lie. Her mind was already halfway out the door. Deirdre looked as though she didn't believe a word of it, but she nodded anyway. "The cash bag is in your place. It has nearly $4,000 in it. Do you have ID and a burner phone? I mean, I don't want you to go, but if you feel you have to, I want you to be safe." "I have cash set aside. I have an ID and burner." Deirdre pulled a sticker from the top of her keyboard and handed it to Bennett. "Put that on there. It's my new burner. If you decide to go, you'll need a way to reach us. Promise if you leave, you'll say goodbye first and let us know that you're okay from time to time." Tears sprang to Bennett's eyes. "I don't want to go. I just don't think I can stay." "You know Nash will want to go with you." Bennett bit her lip. She didn't want to leave him. With every day, the thought got more painful. Leaving everyone here would tear her up inside. He's just starting that new business, and needs this family so much. Besides, he may not be active duty right now, but he's still in the army. He can't just disappear. Deirdre brushed her hand down Bennett's arm. "I think he'd say you're his family, or at least he wants you to be." Bennett turned away, pressing her fingers hard against her eyes, willing back the tears. "Since leaving home, I've never let myself get too attached to anyone. I don't know how to do this." Still, Melanie's accusing words about Grace echoed in her head, pushing. "Then don't go. Stay, and we'll face it together." Shaking her head, Bennett took the sticker with the burner number on it. "You don't understand. Bet you that I would if I knew what you're really hiding from. I'll keep that in mind." She backed out of the apartment and backtracked to her own, walking straight to her room to put the sticker on the side of her burner phone. Maybe she just needed a few days away with Grace. They hadn't taken a vacation, just the two of them. Not in years, and that had only been overnight. If Melanie didn't come back here with the police or a warrant or something, if she actually left town, maybe they could come back in a week or two and it would be fine. Maybe she wouldn't have to make a choice that would feel like ripping out her insides. She was lying to herself, and she knew it, but it was the only way she could keep going. When she came back into the living room with their go bag in hand, Nash was standing at the table, unloading food from a grocery bag. "You owe me lasagna," he said when she stopped and stared at him. "Right." She stashed the bag she was carrying beyond the edge of the sofa, out of his line of sight. Or so she thought. "Are you going somewhere?" I had forgotten all about our dinner in the craziness today. Had that only been 2 nights ago? Funny how that had flown out of her head the second her mother appeared. He stopped unloading the groceries, a can of tomato sauce held in one hand, and looked at her with a knowing look. "You said everything was fine." "I lied. I just needed time to breathe, to think. But I don't think I can do that here. Not today. I have to leave before she comes back with the police or something." Nash came around the counter and saw the bag. His face went blank. "You were going to leave us. Leave me without a word." "Not without a word. Hopefully just a short trip, until Wednesday or the following week after she's gone home." Nash shook his head. "Don't play with me. We both know if you leave, you'll convince yourself to keep on leaving." I don't know that, but he was probably right. They stood motionless for a long moment, staring at each other, watching the emotions play across each other's faces. "Let me go with you. I've been making plans, preparing. I thought this might happen. We barely know each other. You can't leave everything when you've just settled in. Those are excuses. You don't want me to go with you. I hoped if I had a few more weeks with you that you'd change your mind about us. Want me with you. She saw the pain in his eyes and hated that she was one more person walking away from him. I'm sorry. It'll be easier if it's just the two of us. Your active duty is done, but you're not out of the army yet. You can't just disappear. I don't care about that. The clock's tick filled the room as she felt her heart breaking. I believe that's the first time you've ever lied to me. He changed tack. This is not my fearless Bennett. You can't. His voice broke and he swallowed and then tried again. You can't leave without telling me what has you so terrified. Obviously, you need our help. My help. Please let me help you somehow. It's not something simple like adding more security. When Melanie saw Grace today, she figured it out. Bennett covered her mouth and turned away, not believing she had almost told him the truth. She figured what out? Bennett didn't speak, barely capable of holding in her sob. Then, as if pulled by a magnet, Nash moved toward the picture of Nadine, Jax, and Josie that sat on the side table. He picked it up and stared, then turned back to Bennett. Is Grace your niece? The sob won, only to be followed by a dozen others. The door to the hall closed. After a moment, Bennett was wrapped up in Nash's arms, and she let out all of her hurt and fear and stress on his well-built shoulder. They were going to take her with them on the boat, but she wasn't feeling well, so I kept her with me. The harbor master said he saw them with Josie, but must have been thinking of a different day. When I thought about losing her to the system or to my parents, I couldn't let that happen. I let everyone think she was dead and hid her with a friend until after the funeral. I couldn't tell you, she finally managed in a half-strangled voice. I can't lose her. His voice had gone husky. Of course you can't. Bennett took several shaky breaths before calming down enough to pull away. You know I can't stay.
15 Nash knew he was a fool. Nothing he said would get her to stay or even to slow down and think, and she was probably right, at least about leaving for a few days. Her mom had been livid, and she would be back. The thing was, Bennett was no longer that weak, helpless teen who could barely take care of herself and her niece. Who would prosecute her now? It could be argued that technically she hadn't kidnapped the baby. She was the closest family member and clearly did a great job of raising Grace despite the nearly insurmountable odds that had faced her. She was an adult now with a support system, the ability to pay all of the bills, and to take care of Grace's emotional needs. Who would remove Grace from her care now when she was settled and happy? He understood the desperate need to protect Grace on some level. He still blamed himself for his mother's death, as useless and twisted as that was. Still, how could he let her walk away? Grace returned, and Nash laughed and joked with her in the other room as Bennett packed more items in her daughter's suitcase and double-checked things. Grace seemed oblivious to her mother's activities until Nash started putting together sandwiches for dinner. They had to eat something. They ate dinner, and he helped with the dishes. Bennett wiped off the counter and rinsed the dishcloth, laying it on the edge of the sink to dry. Nash waited, inches away, so when she turned, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all of the emotion he didn't dare express aloud, cradling her face in his hands as he kissed her again and again. She kissed him back, her arms wrapping around him, pulling him closer as she took advantage of what might be their last unfettered kiss. Ugh! Grace's footsteps left the room. Nash used that as an excuse to kiss Bennett some more, as if he needed an excuse beyond how perfectly they fit together. Don't go, don't leave me, he murmured against her neck. You know I have to. Then let me go with you. I've been working on an escape plan, just in case. We could go together. I love you. He pressed his lips back to hers. She jerked away, breathing heavy, wide-eyed. You can't. You don't. You're just confused by the chemistry. She pushed him back, away, practically shoved so she could get around him instead of being blocked into the U of the kitchen. Frustrated with himself for saying it when he'd known she wasn't ready to hear, he huffed out, I'm not confused. I know what I want. I want you. I want us. I love you. You don't. Her breathing had become so fast she was practically hyperventilating. I do. What's more, I think you love me too. I wasn't going to tell you yet. I didn't want to freak you out like you're doing right now, but I can't let you go without telling you the truth. If you leave now, you're going to rip my heart right out." She closed her eyes and looked away. "Don't try to manipulate me like that. I've had a life full of it." "That's not what I was doing." He swore fiercely, realizing that of course it had felt that way to her, no matter what his intentions had been. "I can't stay. Not even for you. I've made up my mind." Pain ripped through him so strong he bunched his fists and stalked away, slamming his fist on the door jamb on the way out. He rushed down the stairs to the outside and started to run.
Bennett stood staring at the empty doorway until after she heard the door to the stairwell slam shut and Nash's shoes pounding against the stairs. She heard again the sound of his flesh slamming against the wood of the door jamb. That spark of violence was just like her parents, just like James. It was in Nash, the violence she feared more than anything else. She slumped against the wall, hidden in the corner, and wept with her head tucked against her knees. She didn't want to leave, but she didn't see any alternative. Wiping her face, she stood and moved to the bedroom to collect the bags she had stashed there out of Grace's sight. Maybe Melanie really would leave without causing trouble. Maybe it would be fine and she could come back. She just didn't see how that would be possible. She went through a mental checklist including toys and books and games and decided she had everything. Rolling the bags behind her, Bennett went to the common apartment for Grace and to say goodbye to the others. "Hey, kiddo, what do you say we take a little trip, just the two of us?" she asked Grace, avoiding the gaze of her sisters and trying to look upbeat. "Where are you going?" Mina asked. Bennett didn't meet her gaze. "Maybe St. Louis. It would be nice to just take a break for a few days. I'm not up on the rotation until Wednesday." "This is sudden," Sheila said. "I've been thinking about it for a while. Tell everyone bye and give them a hug, Grace." Bennett didn't meet anyone's eyes, but everyone ended up in the common room before she escaped down the stairs. The adults all seemed to realize that this was it. She was leaving. She got her share of hugs as well. "Where's Nash?" Sheila asked as Bennett pushed the elevator button. "Out somewhere, he knows." "Bennett, don't go." Her voice was urgent. She looked up at Sheila, who had brought them all together in this project, the glue that kept them together as a group. "I don't have a choice." Bennett's words were barely more than a whisper, not wanting Grace to hear. Sheila drew closer and responded in an equally soft tone. "You always have a choice. Talk to us and we'll help you." Bennett believed Sheila meant it, but she didn't know about Grace, and if she did, there was nothing she could do to change the past anyway. "Ask Nash why. Goodbye." Bennett stepped back and the elevator doors closed as she pushed the button for the first floor.
When Nash had worked off enough of his frustration to be able to hold a reasonable conversation, he returned to the apartment building. Sweat still dripping, he bypassed the second floor and headed for his shower first. His hand was torn up, and he was still upset, but he hoped that if he could talk to Bennett a little more, if they worked together, they might find a solution that would give her peace. Feeling a whole lot better, Nash returned to the second floor and beelined to her apartment. The door was closed. He knocked, waited, knocked again. "Nash," Sheila said from her doorway. "She's not there." "What do you mean?" Except he knew as that pit of loss that had been cracked open yawned wide. "She left right after you did. She said St. Louis, but I don't think that was true. Where did you go?" He put a hand out to the door to keep him upright when he realized he had been an idiot to leave when she was already upset. Except he'd had to work off the anger so he could think like a rational person instead of the tangle of emotions that had been attacking him. "For a run. I was so mad that she wouldn't listen to anything I said. I just needed to work off some of my frustration so I could talk to her with a clear head." Nash ran a hand over his hair. "She left already, without even considering letting him join her." "You knew she was going?" Sheila asked. "She said you did, but yes, I hoped I could talk her out of it or go with her. Anything but suffer with this gnawing pain of abandonment." Again, Deirdre joined them. "You can't change the things that people are afraid of. Only they can fix their own problems. Was there more about her mom than what she told us the other day? I mean, This seems like a wild overreaction if that's all it was. He could keep her secret and still answer that honestly. Yeah, there were some extra angles to the situation I didn't learn until this evening. She was very upset about her mom showing up today. Deirdre slid her hands into her back pockets. She has a reason to be. It was too late, though. There was nothing he could do. He pulled out his phone to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. You know she won't turn on her regular phone except in an emergency. She has a burner now, Deirdre said. Do you have her number? He asked. No, but she has my burner. Sheila picked up Nash's hand and looked at the ripped up, bruised side of it. What did you do? Had a fight with a wall. A door jam, actually. He turned and looked at the wood, which was barely indented where he'd hit it. Looks like it won. She told me just before she left that you could tell us what scared her away. I think it's time we had a family meeting with the whole truth. If her mom knows, everyone else probably will soon anyway, Nash agreed. The next hour was agonizing as Nash waited for the kids to settle in for the night. The girls were anxious and cranky, and he wondered if they sensed that their friend was gone for good. Finally, they all got together in the central room to talk. Nash laid it out for them in the fewest words possible. It still stung, even told in that stark manner. How can we help her now? Andrea asked. Deirdre rubbed her forehead. Look, all we can do is hope she works through this on her own. She's taken it out of our hands. She has a way to reach me. Hopefully she reaches out soon. Everyone seemed a little shell-shocked at the revelations as they returned to their apartments. Nash sat at the table, wondering if there wasn't something he could have done to change the outcome. Laying a hand on his shoulder, Deirdre spoke in a gentle voice. Try to get some sleep, and don't blame yourself too much. It was just a door jam, and she was going to run even without it. Whoa, wait, what? That hadn't passed his mind. How do you think it feels to someone who was raised in violence to see something like that? It wasn't a big thing. Honestly, restraint must be your middle name because I've seen you pounding at the boxing speed bag. All three of you are dealing with PTSD, and this was not the best night you've had since leaving the Middle East. He rubbed his hands over his face. One more nail in his coffin of stupidity. He hadn't realized how angry he was until the pain was radiating through his fist. He felt all of the tension he'd beaten out on the asphalt begin to build again. Deirdre must have seen it because she suggested, you could always shoot some hoops on the roof if you aren't done beating yourself up. Thanks. After taking out some aggression on the speed bag, Nash headed up to the roof, but he was worn out from the run and workout, so he just walked circuits in the basketball court, using the lights they'd erected up there for evening activities. He leaned on the railing, looking out over the city, and wondered where Bennett was now, and if he'd ever get over her leaving.
16 Bennett stared out the window of the hotel room in Omaha. Grace had fallen asleep in the car a full hour before they arrived and barely stayed awake long enough to get to her bed in the room. They talked about going to the zoo, swimming, seeing the sights, but this was only a way station, and every mile between here and home seemed like 20. Funny how leaving Baltimore had been simple, but leaving Crystal Creek had ripped out her heart. Then again, there had been nothing for her in Baltimore but pain and suffering when Crystal Creek had her sisters and Nash. The city lights glowed in the distance, making her think of the simple view from the roof of her building. They would finish renovations in a little over 2 months at the current rate. Her apartment would be done and empty while she lived who knew where. She closed the drapes and moved back to the king bed, where Grace was softly snoring. It was super comfortable, with a fluffy white comforter and cushy pillows, nothing like the worn bed she still slept on at home. Home, Nash. Had she reacted too fast? Was leaving really the right choice? When she left Baltimore, she had been far more afraid of staying than of leaving. This time she was equally as afraid of both choices. Protecting Grace was always the right thing, but now that she was away, staring into the dark, she wondered if there hadn't been a way to save at least some of the things she had to leave behind.
Voices carried in the night, and Nash looked down the side of the building to the people rounding to the porch 6 stories below. Two women stood on the steps while a police officer pushed one of the bells. Nash checked his watch. It was after 10. Bennett's mom had brought the law to their doorstep. He waited until Deirdre opened the door and spoke to them, then invited them inside. Time to go down and join the family. It took a few minutes for Nash to get down to the first floor, go around and back up to the second floor. When he arrived, Andrea was arguing with the police officer. If you spent your time going after real murderers instead of wasting it on chasing down a mother who is only trying to protect her child, maybe you would finally be able to solve a real crime. Mrs. Rossi, I'm sorry that you can't accept that your husband's death was accidental, but that has nothing to do with your friend kidnapping her niece. She's not here, Nash said. The officer must not have heard him come through the door at the top of the stairs because he turned in surprise. Do you live here? Yes, and Bennett left. She turned off her phone and took off, and we have no idea where she went. But she'll come back. She lives here. Nash thought Melanie looked even smaller and paler now than she had that afternoon. She looked nothing like her daughter except the eyes. They were definitely Bennett's. She told you she would leave if you didn't leave her alone. Now she's gone, all alone again. It hurt to say the words, but he did his best to keep his voice and face impassible. Melanie's face crumpled. She took my granddaughter again. She had no right. You knew about the kidnapping? A young woman asked. And you are? Amy Glider from Child Protective Services. I'm here to figure out what's going on. Officer Marsh is only here to keep things peaceful. I only learned about it a few minutes before she left. Tell me, if you had been the caseworker when Nadine and Jax had died, what would you have done? You go in, find the teenage sister living with them and the baby. Jax's parents were dead. Bennett had been living unofficially at her sister's for months because her parents were drunks and abusive. Not that anyone in town either knew or cared what was going on. You couldn't send Bennett and Grace to live with abusive alcoholics, and you probably wouldn't have been able to place them in the same foster home, am I right? Ms. Glider considered his words for a moment. If the household really wasn't safe, it wasn't. How would you know what my house was like? Melanie bit out. Nash looked her dead in the eye. Because Bennett told me. I'm really glad that you've managed to get your 1-year chip from AA, but that doesn't change what has already happened. It was not safe for Bennett or her niece in your house at that time. Bennett had been there in her sister's home before the baby was even born. She had been like a second mother to Grace. Josie, Melanie said in little more than a whisper. Josie, then. She had already lost the only safe haven she had ever known. Losing her niece as well was more than she could take. So when everyone thought that Nadine and Jax had the baby with them, she allowed them to believe it, and after the funeral, she and the baby disappeared. I don't pretend to know how she survived those first few years. She keeps that all to herself, but she made it. She worked enough to pay the bills. She got her GED. She even got in a little college, and when she married another person who beat her like her parents had, she left him and started over again. He turned to Melanie. Look at the life she's been building for herself, the officer snorted. She won it all in a lotto. The money she won in a lotto, the life she built for herself, and she gave up the money in a heartbeat. There is nothing that woman loves more than that little girl, and nothing she wouldn't give up to protect her. Even him. Nash looked at the CPS worker. None of us can help you because she didn't tell us anything. She just packed her bags, said goodbye, and left. She either turned off her phone or ditched it because we can't reach her. We'd like to take a look around anyway, the officer said. Go for it. Andrea shot him a malevolent stare. Nash had known that Andrea didn't like the police and believed there had been a cover-up about her husband's death, but he'd never seen her like this before. Maybe it was something specific about this particular man. Deirdre opened every apartment on both floors while the officer had a few friends come down and help him check the building. When they finally left, Nash knew Bennett had made the right choice to leave, even if he didn't like it.
Sunday Bennett pretended to be happy and excited as she took Grace to the zoo. They had been to the one in Houston only a few months earlier, but Grace loved animals and had totally been on board to go to this one too. Except that every time they turned around, she was saying how much Parker, Celan, Chelsea, or one of the other kids would have loved aspects of the zoo. She asked why Nash couldn't come and asked to pick up a souvenir for him. Unable to explain, Bennett had agreed and bought him a bobble-headed monkey. Maybe they could send it to him before they left Omaha. The same issue arose when they stopped at Louis M's Burgerlust for dinner that night. Bennett had known that it would be difficult for them to be separated from the others, but hadn't stopped to consider that the other kids were like siblings to her daughter. How could she separate Grace from her family? She saw the outline of the bobble-headed monkey they had bought for Nash that morning. At least 5 times that day she had wanted to turn to Nash to share something with him. How had he become such a huge part of her life? And so quickly? She thought again of him slamming his fist into that doorway the previous evening. It had scared her. He had scared her. But then he left. He just walked away. Ran, actually. She paused to consider that. Her parents and James had never walked away. They had always come straight to her to work out their frustrations. Nash didn't. He'd realized he was out of control and left. She had turned on her phone for only a few minutes that afternoon, long enough to check for messages before turning it off again. Nash had said he was sorry, that he hadn't meant to scare her, and that he'd gone for a run to get his emotions under control. All 3 of the paratroopers living in their building struggled with PTSD, loss, frustration, sleeplessness. None of them had gone after their women when they were upset. Running, weights, even yoga, but not violence. She had hit things once or twice herself when she had reached her peak of anger and frustration. How could she treat him like a monster for doing the same, especially when he'd immediately redirected himself appropriately? She'd promised herself she would be fearless. Fearless didn't mean stupid, but when she stepped back and looked at what she was leaving behind because of her fear, she realized she had to do something about it, and that choice scared her more than anything she had ever faced. But maybe what she needed was not to be fearless, but to be brave. Monday morning, Bennett found a playgroup for Grace, though it had nearly killed her to leave her daughter for any amount of time. Bennett put on the nicest dress, pants, and blouse that she had packed, the matching blue pumps that Vanna had insisted she needed, and Bennett had randomly packed despite never having worn them before, and walked into an attorney's office. Bennett had been surprised when the family law attorney's office manager had said Ms. Dutson would be able to meet with her that morning, but she wasn't about to complain. Ms. Dutson's office was on the 2nd floor of a nice building, though it wasn't exactly all glossy wood and sparkling glass like the place that had handled their lotto paperwork. The sign on the door said it was the office of Dutson, Rich, and Spicer. Apparently Rich and Spicer had other specialties because their names hadn't popped when Bennett had searched for family law attorneys the previous night. Miss Dutson was late 30s, well-proportioned, and kind-looking. Bennett liked her immediately. "Hello, Ms. Martin. What can I do for you today?" Bennett took the offered seat, sitting on the edge and clutching her purse so her fingers wouldn't tap. "I have an issue, and I need to know what my options are." "Is this regarding a child or a relationship? You have to keep what I say confidential, right?" Bennett couldn't believe she was about to spill her whole story to a complete stranger. "Yes. Whether I take on your case or not, what you say here is between us. What's on your mind?" Reassured, Bennett filled her in. Ms. Dutson must have heard some rather wild stories in the past. Either that or she had a killer poker face because she barely reacted as Bennett spoke, though she asked several questions and made notes. "You have your own business now and you're financially stable? You have a support system, and your daughter is well-adjusted and happy." "Yeah." Bennett had left off the part about winning the lotto, but she figured that Ms. now. Dutson didn't need that information in order to give Bennett an idea of her options. The attorney sat for a moment considering the situation before laying it out for Bennett. "Once the initial shock has passed, how likely is your mother to make a fuss about you having your niece, as in sue for custody or try to get you arrested?" Bennett shook her head. "I've asked myself that a dozen times in the past few days. The truth is that I don't know. The woman who showed up on my doorstep last week is so different from the woman I knew that I have no idea what she's going to do. I'd like to think that she'd just be happy that Grace is alive, safe, and well, but it was so rare for her to be sober that I don't really remember what she was like. She was very angry when she left our store Saturday. I was half surprised she didn't show up in the hour it took me to pack, eat, and say goodbye to everyone. But you took the time to say goodbye anyway. I couldn't disappear without a trace without at least saying goodbye. I don't think I can explain how knowing them has changed my life in all of the best possible ways. Ms. Dutson tapped her pencil on the desk for a moment, while she thought for a very long moment. Honestly, I think we could make a case, if we approached the right agency ourselves, to have Grace declared alive and give you custody. There are some risks, and it won't be an easy road, but it's that or stay on the run, possibly for the rest of your life. Ms. Dutson continued. The baby wasn't in state's custody. The parents were dead. All other living family members were unsuitable. You provided food, clothing, a roof over her head, safety, and security. The fact that you were underage at the time is no longer relevant since you're an adult now who is making a decent living. We'd have to take it to the right people. But I think you could get this settled so it won't haunt you anymore, at least as far as the state is concerned. Whether your mother chooses to file a civil suit is an issue that will have to be faced separately. How does that sound? Amazing. Is it really possible? I'm not going to lie to you. There is some risk that things will not go your way, but I have a friend in Kansas City who's very good with child custody cases. He's not the most affordable attorney out there. That's not a problem. But he's very good. I'd take your case myself, but I'm not licensed to practice in Kansas, so you'd be better off with someone local. Bad enough that you're already having to deal with Baltimore on this. That is such a relief. You have no idea. Bennett couldn't believe that this might all be resolved without her losing Grace. Ms. Dutson wrote a name and number on the back of one of her business cards. Call him right away and get this moving. I will. Thanks so much. Bennett took the card and shook the attorney's hand.
17. A week passed. A whole week, and Nash hadn't been able to do anything except leave a daily message on Bennett's phone to tell her that he missed her and hoped she was safe. He had no idea if she was listening to them, but he had to do something, and that was the only thing left to him. The police station was only half a block away, and it hadn't been uncommon to see black and whites and officers driving by the building, but it seemed to be much more common lately, like the whole department was watching to make sure that Bennett didn't try to sneak back and hide in their fortress. He wished she had. Since she hadn't, Nash threw himself into work. He created designs for every customer name that crossed their desks. He worked on some prototypes that he and Ethan had been discussing for new camera systems, and he had nightmares every time he closed his eyes. Oh, the nightmares had been common enough before, fighting in Afghanistan, but now they included Bennett and Grace, sometimes in the thick of battle, sometimes in trouble in the U.S., but always just a heartbeat too far away. He woke in a cold sweat again and peeled back the covers to stare at the sliver of light on the ceiling from the streetlight outside. His heart was pounding like mortars, and he could hardly catch his breath. Nope, not going back to sleep again tonight. Nash looked at the clock. 7. Fine. He pulled himself out of bed and, hearing the faint clanging of weights from across the hall, headed to the apartment where all of the exercise equipment had been set up. To his surprise, he found Deirdre working out instead of one of his buddies. I admit it, I didn't expect you. He started his stretches. Couldn't sleep, it feels wrong here without her. Plus, she's the only one who understood all of the bookkeeping. It's fallen on my shoulders, and my shoulders don't like it, Deirdre grumbled. Can't blame you. Sitting still hasn't been easy this week. Nor has sleeping in, or that. I keep thinking she might call, even though I know she won't. It has me on edge. I'm ready to get out of here. You still headed to Houston on Tuesday? Deirdre asked when she had switched from hand weights to a yoga mat for crunches. Yeah, I might as well clean out my storage unit and settle in here. Doesn't look like I'll be going anywhere else anytime soon. This trip isn't an excuse to go meet up with her, is it? Deirdre asked after he had stepped onto the elliptical. He and Ethan had scheduled a trip to Houston to meet with clients, powwow with Ethan's brother, Jared, and pick up the rest of Nash's stuff from storage. I wish it were, but I haven't heard anything from her. You? Just a single text every couple of days. She must turn on her burner phone, send the text, then turn it off again immediately. Doing fine, love you all. I guess it's too soon to expect her to feel safe calling, even on burners. Nash picked up the pace. At this rate, he would be in the best shape of his life if he ever saw her again. If you push any harder on that machine, you'll break it. It wasn't made for Superman types. Nash realized he was going way faster and harder than he could maintain and slowed back down, then got off completely. Tell me some good news. I need something upbeat right now. I do not want to give up on her, but I can't live like this. Feeling sorry for myself is over. She didn't want me, fine. Time to move on. If that's your incredibly romantic way of asking me out, I'm sorry, but I can't. He smiled and moved to the hand weights, picking up a set considerably heavier than those she had been hefting. Oh man, 2 rejections in 1 week. I was thinking more like getting out and meeting people. Not just women, but people in general. Maybe I can help at the garden next door. I know squat about gardening, but how hard can it be to pull a few weeds? I'd offer to pull yours, but you don't seem to have any. Deirdre smiled. It helps to be wealthy and to be able to afford weed-free mix. I'm sure in time we'll get some seeds that manage to make their way up to the roof. But I'm not complaining about less work. I can hook you up with the community garden people after you get back from Houston. Sounds good. He focused on his workout and chose to believe that Bennett would stay safe. Maybe someday that would be enough for him. Nash was in the store Tuesday afternoon helping Sheila haul a decorative table made of stainless steel into position in her section. He hadn't heard a thing from Bennett, though he had sent her a text each day to let her know he was thinking of her and hoped she was okay. He didn't know if she was getting them since she hadn't responded, but he had to do something, even if it wasn't much. There we go, Sheila said as she set down her end. Who knew functional could be so beautiful? So true, and heavy. Dang, I hope they have a truck and a couple of muscular men to haul the thing. If not, I might know a couple guys who could load it for them. Sheila said with a grin, It's so convenient that you work in this building. Right, lucky us. The front door opened and Sheila turned to greet the customer. Oh, it's you. Nash turned to see Melanie standing in the shop, her hand gripped nervously on the strap of a worn, faux leather purse. Do you need something? Melanie bit her lip. I've had time to think over the past week about what you said. You were right, it was foolish for Bennett to take Josie, or, Grace like she did. But I understand why. I couldn't give either of them what they needed because I couldn't even take care of myself. So, if you hear from her again, tell her that I don't want to ruin her life. I'm sorry I got the authorities involved at all. She said she would leave if I didn't. I didn't want to push her out. I just wanted back in, but I can see that I went about everything the wrong way. She looked around the store. This is such a nice place. She must love working here. She did. She put a lot of time into getting it ready. Nash felt the ice in his chest melt ever so slightly. I'm leaving, back to Baltimore, and I'll stay there unless she invites me back. Do you think she'll come back when I leave? I don't know. The legal issues will have to be dealt with if she does, but I'm sure we'll see her again. He had to believe that because the thought of never seeing Bennett again was more than he could take right now. Someday. Then can you get her these? She pulled 3 tiny dolls out of her pocket and set them in Nash's hand. Maybe she doesn't even remember. She and her sister used to play with these all the time. I found them in a box when I was cleaning things out last year. I just couldn't throw them out, and I hoped she would have sweet memories with them. It wasn't always awful at our house. Polly Pockets? Sheila asked. Nash held them in his hands and wished Bennett was around to get them directly from her mom. No, she does remember them. She mentioned them to me once. I think she'll be pleased to have them. It was a very good memory of her childhood with Nadine. I hope so. Tell her I'm sorry I disrupted her life. If she ever wants to see me, she'll know how to find me. I haven't moved. I hope someday she'll be able to forgive me, at least a little. I will, and thank you for these." He held them up. "I'll figure out how to get them to her eventually. I need to catch my plane. Have a good day." She hurried out, her shoulders a little more stooped than before. Nash pulled out his phone and sent a text to Bennett, not sure if she would ever see it. "Your mother is leaving town now. She's not coming back. If there's any way to work out the legal stuff, please come home."
Bennett saw Nash's message when she had already parked in the garage under their apartment building. Her heart fluttered at his words. She did feel like she was coming home, not just to her sisters and her building, but to him. Grace was tired and dragging as they got into the elevator to the second floor, but she perked up when she came out and found Celine in the hall. The girls put their heads together and headed into the common apartment. Just before Bennett reached her place, Andrea popped out with a grin, her tight curls bouncing. "You're back. We weren't sure if we'd ever see you again." She wrapped Bennett in a tight hug. "Me either. I just needed a breather so I could wrap my head around a few things and get some expert advice. It's been a very busy week. I'll tell everyone the whole story tonight. For now, just know that we're following legal channels and I get to keep Grace until everything is straightened out. Nash did tell you, right?" "Yeah." The peace of mind alone was well worth the fee Bennett had paid to meet with the attorney in Omaha and the new one in Kansas City. She would have to deal with the consequences of her mother's visit for several months, maybe a year or more, but the caseworker, her attorney, and who knew who else had managed to grant her temporary custody of Grace until all of the legal details could be hashed out. She hoped it wouldn't take long, but if it did, it was still worth it to have had Grace with her all of these years. Bennett unlocked her apartment door and wheeled her bag in, tossed her emergency bag on the sofa nearby, and glanced at her power word again. Fearless. Well, here goes. She found Sheila standing with Andrea when she turned around. After another hug, Bennett asked, "Is he upstairs? Yeah, go get him, Tiger." Sheila grinned. Though she felt like an idiot, Bennett headed straight back to the stairs. "Keep an eye on Grace for me." "Of course," Andrea said. Though she considered taking the elevator, the stairs would probably be quicker, and putting off her arrival on the men's floor was just stupid, especially when she wanted to see him. She didn't have to go to his apartment, though. The office Nash and Ethan shared was open. A light over the desk shone on Nash as he worked at his computer. She watched him for a few seconds, taking in his muscles and dark features. He wasn't the handsomest man she had ever seen, but there was just something about him that had grabbed her at some point in the past 6 months. She didn't think it would ever let go. Seeing him there, the truth hit her smack in the face. She was in love with him. And that was far less scary with this man than she had expected it to be. She stuffed her hands in her back pockets and rocked back on her heels. "Hey, hard at work?" His head whipped around and his eyes widened. Bennett. The word was practically a benediction. Bennett had spent a good portion of her drive home trying to figure out what to say to him, how to explain. Something witty, pithy, perfect. In that moment, though, there was nothing she could think to say except, "I'm sorry." He stood and began a slow walk to her. "You're sorry?" "I'm sorry for not trusting you, for being mean to you for so many months, for holding back even after we got together. I'm sorry I left you and let you believe I could stay away, even if I wanted to. And I'm sorry for not telling you on Saturday night that I love you too. In my defense, I didn't realize it until just now." Now within reach, he pulled her close, wrapping his arms tight around her shoulders. "So, you do love me?" "How could I not? You let me win one of the go-kart races so I wouldn't feel so bad about being a total loser. You arrange picnics on the roof and go for long runs when you're uptight so you won't hurt anyone. And I know that if you get mad in the future, you'll take yourself out of the situation again. You make me laugh, and you're wicked smart. You kiss like a devil, but treat me like I'm an angel. You're kind to my daughter, treating her as though she were your own. And when things get tough, you want to work with me to find a solution, not try to figure it all out on your own and present me with a solution of your choosing. When the caseworker was here, you helped her see my side of things even though you didn't expect me to come back. And you catch me when I fall off ladders. Of course, I love you. Do you really love me? She held him back as tight as she could. His voice was a low rumble in her ear when he answered. Even when you're being sassy, you make me laugh. You work so hard and don't expect anyone to bail you out. You're a pretty amazing kisser yourself. When you don't know how to do something, you aren't afraid to learn. You always keep me guessing. You're an amazing mother, a caring sister, and you make every moment of my life better just because you're in it. I was a goner the first night I met you. Really? Oh yeah, if you'd proposed right then and there, I would have said yes. If you'd proposed right then, I would have kicked you in the shin. You did. Oh right, well, I would have kicked you again, probably in the exact same place. Thankfully, I wasn't stupid enough to ask you that day. Do you think you'll be ready for me to ask you soon? He started circling her around to his apartment door, which was wide open. I think that's entirely possible. Tonight? Maybe not tonight. That's okay, I need to buy a ring first. In the meantime, he kicked the door closed behind them and lowered his mouth to hers. All of the pent-up frustration and worry seemed to fall away as she let herself melt into the kiss, into the feel and smell and taste of him. She opened her eyes to look for a sofa or chair and realized he didn't have one. When are you going to get your stuff from storage again? I'm supposed to leave. She wants you to be happy. I think that was the best gift she could have given me. Bennett fingered the small dolls and leaned into Nash's chest, resting her head on his shoulder. Where were you? Omaha the first weekend. But the attorney I spoke to there referred me to one here, and I came back to the area last Tuesday. After some legal wrangling, the attorney, caseworker, and courts will work with me to let me adopt or get legal or permanent custody of Grace. Really? Yeah, I'll have a number of hoops to jump through before everything is settled, but Nash, Grace could be mine for real. That's amazing, but won't you have to tell her the truth? Bennett tapped her fingers against the countertop. Yeah, I will. She might be mad, but I think she'll roll with it soon enough. I'll leave it up to her whether she wants me to adopt her, which is what I want, or just to take permanent guardianship. After everything's settled, will you reach out to your mom? Bennett ran her fingers over the tiny dolls. Yeah, once everything is final and she can't change her mind and fight for custody. She deserves to know, even if that's as far as it goes. I'd like to find some kind of closure with her, even if I don't let her back in my life, in any regular kind of way. That's very brave. But then again, you did have a goal of being fearless. Bennett pulled him close again and kissed him thoroughly. 18. It was 4th of July and people had already started their firework displays. The whole Shelter Sisters family, including their men, had spent the day watching the parade down Main Street from the front walk, picnicking on the roof with the barbecue spewing out delicious smells and munching on fresh chilled watermelon. They had played games on the basketball court, made ice cream in a machine, and lay in the shade on the grass listening to the noises of cars and people below while the kids watched a movie on Andrea's tablet. It had been a nearly perfect day, and Bennett was enjoying the cooler air that blew across them now that the sun had set. She tugged on her patriotic t-shirt, which read, "We celebrate our independence by blowing things up." It was, after all, the best part of the day. One amazing explosion after another filled their view, as they had for several days already. Kansans really loved their fireworks. The only thing missing was Nash holding her hand. Bennett glanced back at the door to the stairwell when it opened, and he ambled out carrying a cake with one thin burning candle. Seriously, I don't think I could eat another bite, Deirdre said. That's okay, it's not for you. Nash brought it over to Bennett and knelt down next to her bench. Her breath caught as she glanced down at the diamond ring encircling the candle in the center of the cake. Bennett Martin, you are the light of my life. I love you. Marry me? That would make you my dad, Grace said. She'd taken the news about her past with amazing aplomb and had immediately chosen adoption over permanent guardianship, which thrilled Bennett. It most certainly will. Are you okay with that, Your Grace? Grace giggled. I want you to be my dad. He looked back at Bennett. So? Well, with that rousing support, how could I ever say no? She blew out the candle and wrapped her arms around him, kissing him softly. Here you go, man. Bennett looked up and saw Ethan had taken the cake and was handing Nash the ring. It was covered in frosting, so Nash put it in his mouth to clean it and then slid it onto Bennett's ring finger. As if in celebration, a nearby neighbor shot a volley of fireworks into the sky while Bennett kissed him again. Sometimes timing was everything. Thanks for listening to Fearless Love, Book 3 in the Shelter Sisters series. Please like this story to help others find it, and subscribe to be notified when I post other sweet romance or romantic suspense stories. Hope to see you soon.